And we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. See if a few people say hello in the chat, just so know everything's working. You can hear me all right. Right, only about 10 people so far. Okay, it's not too bad. Ah, good, you can hear me. Great. Right, so this is my rather belated 20,000 subscriber special. I mean, it's been over a month now, actually, since I passed 20,000 a month, something like 21,400. I hadn't originally planned anything when I reached 20,000 for a special, because when I reached 1,000, I did a Q&A, and then when I reached 10,000, I did my first live stream tier list, and so I thought, yeah, I'll just another Q&A, because I'll get a lot more questions, and a lot more questions I did indeed get. There's like, I've got 70 or 80, and I'm sure I'll get more. There's already a couple in the chat as well, which I'll try to answer as well. So yeah, I'll obviously now you can. There's no screen sharing, so that's good for me. I can see the chat on the screen, so that'll help things. So yeah, I'll just get going with the first question. So, first question is from Laurie Rastogi, who asks, "How many karting tracks and F1 races have you been to?" So I've been to 3 karting circuits. 2 of them were indoor ones, where you just do timed laps. One of them was my local kart circuit, which I actually used to work at as a teenager, and as a track marshal. It was one of my first jobs, and I did a little bit of racing there, but wasn't very good. This is when I thought I could become an F1 driver by starting at 16, but that didn't happen. And in terms of F1 races, I've been to the British Grand Prix twice. So I went in 2011, and then I went again in 2012. My memory's a little patchy with 2011, because I get the two mixed up a bit, because it rained. I remember it raining most of the weekend, and I was camping as well, so that wasn't fun. And I'm someone that's not particularly big on camping anyway, so that wasn't brilliant. And the 2012 one, I went with my dad, and we stayed in a B&B, and that was a bit nicer, because again, it was very heavy weather, and we had that was the race where qualifying got delayed by over an hour because of heavy rain, and we were sat in the grandstands opposite the pit straight, doing Mexican waves coming all the way around from Club and Vale up to Abbey, and the drivers would come out and wave at us and stuff, so that was all good fun. If I could go every year, I would, but it's expensive. But yeah, I'm sure I'll go to Silverstone again, and then maybe some other ones as well. Right, there's already a few questions in the chat, so I'll try and answer some of these quickly. Are you putting the new Forgies on the Jeep? Right, I don't really understand that. Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that. Blue Oris, you should do a series on Minardi. Yeah, I've kept thinking about this, is if I should just do a general history, or if I should do like an old school, like excruciating detail every race video and split that up by season. Yeah, Minardi I should do, because I did a video ranking all their cars, but I haven't really touched Minardi, but they're obviously the archetypal backmarkers, so I should probably do more of them. What else have we got? When can we expect 90s car ranking? That will get started, I'm going to say soon-ish. It's not going to be the next video by any means. I've got a preliminary ranking and all the data I need, but then I haven't done any script writing or any hardcore research. That's another big one that's probably going to take 3 weeks to a month to make. But that will come out within the next, let's say within the next few months. I'll get that one done, certainly. Do you think Caterham would have scored points if they kept Kovalainen? Well, in 2013, no. They didn't come anywhere near scoring points that year. The best they had, I think the best finish was 14th, and the best qualifying result was Van der Gaard at Spa, where he was like 13th, so I don't think that I don't think they would have scored points even with him. They came very close. Obviously, Petrov got 11th. Brazil 2012, but otherwise no. The first race I watched. The first race I can definitely remember that race specifically was Indianapolis 2007. I don't remember a huge amount other than Takuma Sato spinning off at turn 4. I watched F1. I knew what it was when I was a kid, so there were a few races around 2002, 2003. I'd watch them for a bit if they were on, but I took very little interest in Formula One. I remember there was a race where I was surprised because Schumacher was running around like 6th or 7th. I think it might have been Hockenheim 2003 because I think that's where he finished in that race. So that's one of the earliest ones. But the earliest one that I remember for definite is Indianapolis 2007. Thoughts on the revamped Barcelona chicane now that the race has happened? Yeah, much better. They should have never had that chicane. So it's annoying that they've changed turn 10 because now I can't compare lap times with the pre-2007 layout because I want to see how these cars size up compared to those, but that's annoying. Oh god, there's quite a few coming in here. Okay, I'll do a couple more from the chat and then I'll go back to the list because there's a lot in there as well. So Joe Baker, will you do an F1 23 gameplay and give your opinion on it? I got £60 Amazon gift card. I wonder if it's good or not. I don't have F1 2023. I'll probably get it eventually, but I have F1 22 and I've played it once and I didn't like it because the handling is appalling on the cars. I haven't touched the others because I've only got a laptop. I don't have a sim rig or anything. I've played a lot of F1 2020 and 2019. 2019 doesn't work on my laptop anymore. It crashes on startup. 2021 is a bit annoying because the cars are a bit harder to handle. And again, it's kind of pushing the laptop to its limits in terms of graphics. Yeah, I'm not the best person to go for asking opinions on the races, I don't think. Or the race games even. Because I'm not a sim racer. Do you plan to do more videos about the 1980s? Yeah. I'm sure it will come up. I mean, I've covered the two main big parts of... I've done the ground effect video, I've done the turbo era video, but I'll make sure to try and shoe in more stuff about the 80s because that's an era that I love as well. Okay, so now the next one that I've got written down from Dexter Troisky asks, do you feel life has changed for you a bit on the YouTube now that you are becoming more well-known and respected in the community? Yeah, overall, I'd say it has. Obviously, now, Twitter, I've got a much larger follow account than I had before I was doing F1, so people are more likely to challenge me or call me out if I say something they don't like. I've had... let me read the question. Well, it's changing the perspective that I'm making a hell of a lot more money than any other job I've ever had, and it's a completely different career trajectory than what I was expecting to do, which I think is basically because of the pandemic. This became a hobby, and then it got monetized, and it became a job. So this is not what I was planning to do, but it just kind of happened, and I guess I'm one of the lucky ones that committed to it and eventually got it paid off. I have had... There was somebody at my local barber who knew who I was. That was interesting because I said to the guy, he was like, so what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a YouTuber. And I was like, I make videos about F1. And the guy next to me getting his haircut was like, what's your name? And I said, Peter Brook. And he's like, right, I have heard of you. So that's the closest I've got to meeting someone in person, a subscriber in person. Yeah. What would you work if you didn't start this channel? Okay, so before this, I was training to be a professional musician, as a professional bassoonist. So I'm a classically trained musician. I've got 2 music degrees. I'd finished my master's degree about 6 months before the pandemics and the lockdowns began. And for the first couple of years of the pandemic, I was still practicing every day, trying to find gigs with orchestras. And then I just kind of ran out of steam with that. And then YouTube just exploded. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to do that now full time. So yeah, I haven't touched... I played bassoon. I used to play cello as well. I bought a saxophone recently, but I haven't played it much, and I did a bit of piano. Yeah, I hardly play them now because most of my time is spent working on YouTube. Okay, next question. I've merged some of the questions together because a lot of them were quite similar ones. So Aditya Begus and Spawn of Cornbread both ask, what is your best and worst livery during the year of 2000 to present? Best livery. The ones that I really like are it's the it's Red Bull's pre-season testing livery. I think it's is it 2018 that has that there's the like black and silver striped zebra pattern type thing they've got. That is amazing, and they've got that like black and blue digital camouflage one as well. I absolutely love those. And obviously 2012 HRT is a favorite, and the Jag livery, the British Racing Green. Those are the ones I really like. I'm not a huge fan of 2013 Sauber. It's just that gunmetal grey. That's not brilliant. I was never a fan of the Force India livery 2014 to 2016. That just sort of silvery black thing that didn't work for me. And also, I'm going to say the Red Bull one, but just because it's been around for so long, it's just getting kind of boring, and it's changed relatively little. Whereas the Ferrari, they've kept the red for the whole time, except for a couple of times they've done blue and yellow. But they keep changing it. Like the current livery is fantastic for Ferrari with the black. It's got that 90s throwback to it, and everything. Do you like Charles Leclerc's piano music? I haven't really listened to it much. I mean, I'm not gonna. I think it's good that he's doing it. I'm not gonna pass judgment and say, oh, he's not very good or whatever, because he's obviously learning in his own. I mean, he's an F1 driver first and foremost, not a musician. So I think for what it's good that he's got the enthusiasm, and he clearly loves doing that outside of F1. And yeah, it's nice enough. It's fairly easy listening. I mean, not everyone has to have these amazing skills and whatnot to do music professionally. Let's see. 2006 McLaren is hot garbage. I love that livery. That's like, because I'm wearing. I mean, I've got this. I'll show off. I'm wearing my Vodafone McLaren livery. I'll model a bit. I've had this since I was 16, and it still fits me. Somehow, this is like the third time I've worn it. This is a Hamilton signed one from 2007, 2008. Yeah, the 2006 Vodafone's fantastic because they went all in on the chrome, and it's like looking in a mirror. I love that car, the MP4 21, 2006. Yeah, the 21. Okay, what's the next one? Will Goldborn asks, which F1 name from the past would you most like to see on the grid? Lotus, Minardi, March, Jordan, Force India, Maserati, Tyrrell, Brabham, BRM, BMW, Porsche, Honda, Andrea Moda. Maybe not the last one, but any others you can think of. Okay, but that's a lot to be listed there. Well, my first thought, well, HRT, if they could come back, I would always love that. I like manufacturers. So if BMW came back as a proper works team, like I would like a proper manufacturer team, that would be great. Because we've had them, obviously we've had them as BMW Sauber, and then we've had BMW Williams, and then the only time they've been a kind of proper constructor was 1969. They entered a Formula 2 car in the German Grand Prix. But I would love to see BMW with in a classic like BMW Motorsport white and blue livery. I think that'd be great. We need more manufacturers. We need more engine suppliers. We need more of a lot of stuff. I've got one future video I'm going to do. I've probably fairly soon. I'm going to do a sort of manifesto of what I would do if I was FIA president and how I'd change the regulations and, bring more teams in and mess around with other stuff and change the calendar and everything that I think needs improving. And just undoing everything that Stefano Domenicali's doing, basically. So I'll go into more detail on something like that. Let's see. Next question. Kids Love F1 asks, roughly how long does it take to produce each video? It varies. So the fastest video I made took me 4 hours. and that was this. It was last year. I did a very quick video similar to the Charles Leclerc at the Monaco Grand Prix. I did one for Daniel Ricciardo in Australia, and it's 5 minutes long, and I made it in 4 hours. It's not very good, and it's only got like 1,000 views or whatever it shows. The longest video was the second iceberg video that came out a couple of months ago. That took over a month. It varies. It depends on the length. So the last video, the Ferrari downfall video, that's 15 minutes long. That took a week and a half. Yeah. So not. It depends on what the video involves, because there are some where you write the script and then you record it, and then I have to spend ages finding all the videos and all the visuals and everything else. And then there are others like the original point system one, where I have to spend absolutely ages doing number crunching and rejigging all of the championship results. But then it's very easy to write the script, and I don't need any visuals much. So yeah, let's say about 2 weeks per video on average, I'd say. A couple of other questions in the chat. Let's see. Do you watch any other racing series like Formula E, GT racing, stock car? I watch Formula 2 and Formula 3, a little bit of FRECA, sometimes Formula 4, just because they're on YouTube and you can. I've started getting into IndyCar recently. So each year I would watch the 500, but I've been watching the races themselves. I didn't watch the last one because it was on at the same time as F1, and F1 takes precedence. But yeah, I'm starting to get into IndyCar. I still don't entirely understand a lot of the rules, because they don't have blue flags. They don't seem to use safety cars in the same way. The tyres are different. They can push a lot more. I don't really understand oval racing as well, because the way it seems to work is that whoever's leading is the slowest car, because you're very, very lucky if you can break ahead and break the slipstream from everyone else. But then when they were racing at, was it St. Petersburg, or there was an oval recently, and Paso O'Ward was like 2 seconds a lap faster on an oval and almost lapping everyone. I don't really understand how that works. Yeah, I do watch Formula E sometimes as well, but I'm kind of divided on what I think of that. I watch Le Mans. Before I was into F1, I was more into touring cars and endurance racing, although I didn't watch much of them because you can't really watch them for free so much. But yeah, Formula 1 is the main one. What editing software do you use? I use Wonderchef Filmora to make my videos, which I did originally because before I was doing F1, I was making split-screen videos of myself playing bassoon, so I could have myself playing quartets and stuff. And it had a split-screen function, so I got it because of that, and then I started using it to make videos as well. When are you going to continue the story of Haas? Because around 2019 to 21, they had literally the worst season 8 team in history. So Haas, that's probably going to be, after the video that's currently in development, that's probably going to be the next one. Because obviously people are asking about it, and I'm aware it's been over a year since I last did that one. So I did part 3, the 2018 one. I will get it done. My issue with those videos, even though those are the style of videos I did originally, is that they take a very long time to make, and they don't get that many views in the end. So the payoff is not brilliant. But that one I'll need to go. It'll be more interesting, I think, because the previous ones involved watching every race in like 2016 and 2007 several times, because I'm covering teams that have, having done like Super Aguri, Midland, HRT, Haas, all of these ones that raced alongside each other. You end up covering a lot of the same races over and over again. But this will be the first time I've had to go back and watch every race from 2019 and do it. How do you prepare for your driver or car ranking videos, and what would you recommend people to watch? What would you recommend to people who want to rewatch every race? I'm assuming you mean which seasons. So with the driver and car ranking ones, I will basically go through their Wikipedia page, and it just gives me the basic statistics first. So I'll go through and see how many races they did, how many points, wins, everything else, how many retirements. With the cars as well, I have to go through and see how many mechanical breakdowns there were, so I can get a rough idea of reliability. Off of that, I'll then basically put them all together, and that gives me a rough idea of ranking. and then I'll actually do the hardcore research. So with the drivers, I'll have to go through their whole career and see, you know, where they performed well and where they didn't, and what they were like as a person, and all of that. And again, the cars, it's looking at their overall performance and how they did in qualifying, and then you can refine things a bit more and change it. And that's basically how it is. I mean, there are some rankings are easier than others, because there are some lists where it's obvious already who's going to be number one or who's going to be the bottom. But yeah, you'll see this, that there is a rough trajectory, particularly with the cars. I don't line them up exactly, but you'll see that it tends to go from the ones that finished at the bottom of the constructors to the ones at the top. Unsurprisingly, it kind of goes roughly in that order. Basically, yeah. Monumentos asks, what is your favorite F1 circuit? This can be from modern or past circuits. My favorite circuit is the Nürburgring, basically. It's obviously incredibly, I'm talking about the Nordschleife. It's obviously incredibly ill-suited to modern Formula One. As much as we'd love to see them driving there are lots of reasons why they can't. And if they did, they would have to probably change a lot of things at the circuit, which a lot of people would not like. But also, the racing probably wouldn't be that good, because it would look good, but the track is so narrow, and it's so bumpy, you wouldn't see much in the way of overtaking, except on that extremely long back straight. Setup would be a nightmare, probably, because it has... I suppose, actually, no. You could basically go for a low downforce setup, because most of the corners are fairly low speed. There's a few things like Flugplatz around that area, which are quite fast, but the rest of the circuit is fairly low speed corners. And then you got that very, very long straight. So it's the kind of thing, yeah, a low downforce setup would probably work. Yeah, Nordschleife is definitely my favourite. In terms of current ones, it's between Spa and Monza, so I like them old school, basically. Okay. Next up, Duck Reach asks, do you think Audi's entry to F1 will coincide with more mixed results, or will we continue with one team dominating for years at a time? It's hard to say, but I think we're in a position, and we've been in this position for 20 odd years now, that because the regulations are so tight, it's limiting innovation, and meaning that if you're getting situations like we've had with Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, and now Red Bull again, where you go for one concept and it works, and if you don't copy that, it just doesn't work. And there aren't any opportunities to do something completely new, such as bringing in ground effect or turbo engines or traction control and active suspension. We don't have that. There's not that room for that anymore. So Audi, if they've got a good budget, I would say there's no reason they can't do well. But then Toyota had a ton of money when they came in, and they spent a whole year testing a car, and then it all went for naught, essentially. It will change things up, because obviously every time they bring new regulations, it mixes the grid up. But I think we're probably going to see more domination. What I would love to see in terms of car regulations is to just open it up again completely. So basically, I would say something like minimum weight 500 kilograms, a maximum wheelbase of X amount, maximum width of X amount, has to have a halo, has to have, a safety cell past the crash test, have tethered wheels, etc. Beyond that, do whatever you want. If you want to do ground effect, do ground effect. If you want an exhaust blown diffuser, get that. If you want, well, we can do engine regulations, it's different. But if you, no movable aerodynamic devices, but otherwise just do something different. Because that was how we had, like, in the late 70s, early 80s, we had a run of, 6 different champions in 6 years. Because every year a team would try something different, and then people would try and copy it, and then they would improve on it. And it just advanced things so much in terms of car technology. What do you think of doing the French Grand Prix at Le Mans? Yeah, I'm down for that. I'm very curious to see how a Formula One car would respond at La Sarthe. Because it's, again, I don't know, maybe they've I watched Le Mans each year, maybe they've improved the surface, but playing it on Gran Turismo, it is very bumpy. And obviously you would just need you would just need to run the lowest downforce settings you can possibly have, and the engines would be pushed to their limits to be running at that speed for so long. It was the same. It's similar to the old Hockenheim, but worse in terms of how long the straights are and how much power you would need. Yeah, some people obviously think it should just be for Le Mans, and I understand that as well. But like, yeah, why not give it a go and just see what happens? It's better than what they've done. It's better than Paul Ricard. I don't mind Manicourt, but a lot of people don't like it. But I think why not? Just try something different. And it's a classic circuit that's been around since time immemorial. Do you think Red Bull will have a perfect season and win every GP this year? It's just been wild how much faster than they are in the competition. Yeah, so in terms of... this is the interesting thing, is that the field spread has probably never been closer. Unless you count 2012 without Cater and Murata and HRT. If you think there's about 2 seconds, if that, covering the whole field, but about half to 3/4 of a second is just the gap from Red Bull to everyone else. I think they could, on the basis that the cars just don't ever break down anymore. If you think that in 1988, McLaren, they won all but one race, and that was despite the fact that both their cars broke down still fairly regularly, but usually one of the others could keep leading if the other one went up. And the only one they lost was when Senna got taken out by a backmarker when lapping him right at the end. And Mercedes 2016, they would have won every race had they not crashed into each other in Barcelona and had... obviously Malaysia, Rosberg gets taken out by Vettel, and then Hamilton's engine goes kaput. Other than that, they could have won every race, even though obviously Monaco really wasn't for... ideally, it should have been Ricciardo, but obviously the pit stop, and because it's Monaco, went to Hamilton. Yeah, basically. So I think if the cars don't break down, I think there's every reason to believe that they can win every race. What do you make of rocket-powered Mohawk's rather questionable B&Q Pride short? I haven't seen it, so yeah, I don't know what. I'll need to find that afterwards. Do you think that Audi and Andretti will be better off than the 2010 new teams? Yeah, I think so. On the basis that they're not like startup teams, because they've been around. It's the first F1 foray, but they've been around for years and racing for years. Well, Andretti they do race in IndyCar as a team, but yet obviously Audi's been around for doing everything. If they've got good budgets, then yeah, they will do better, because obviously the three new teams, they had tiny budgets and were totally new, even though they had some experienced people involved in behind the scenes. So yeah, I think I would expect them to be in a similar position to Haas in their first year. So just kind of in the midfield, scoring points every once in a while. Let's see. Freddie Faz asks, how does it feel to be followed by so many people? Good, I guess. I mean, I suppose if you look at YouTube as a whole, my subscriber count is relatively small, but I guess in terms of F1 YouTubers, I'm definitely one of the bigger channels, even though Tomo, Aldas, and Josh are like the three big ones who all have over 100,000. It's like 300 for Josh. Perspective is approaching 100, and then you've got people like Chain Bear, John Warren, F1 Word, Aidan Millward. Yeah, so I guess I'm one of the bigger ones, but still relatively small in the grand scheme of things. But no, it's good. It's good that I at least have an expectation when I upload a video that it's going to get X amount of views and there'll be lots of interaction and engagement. Whereas for a lot of smaller people, when you've only got 500 subs, you may only expect about a couple of hundred views on a video and that. Do you see Aston Martin realistically challenging for a title in the next few seasons? Yeah, I mean, they're in a difficult position because everything is working really well except for Lance, basically. He's holding them back enormously, and the catch is obviously that he has that seat forever because his dad is running the team. And obviously has a good business head. He's putting a lot of money into it. Alonso is really enjoying himself and driving the socks off the car. Alonso potentially, I could see him challenging for the drivers, but with Stroll in the car, they're not winning a constructors title anytime soon, unless they build something that's like ridiculously fast next year that nobody can touch. Chamber hasn't been active for a while. I haven't seen. I mean, I suppose I haven't really thought of it. I haven't seen him on Twitter much recently, and I haven't watched. I don't remember watching any of his videos since his review of Ferrari's tyre strategy at Hungary last year, and that was almost a year ago. So yeah, some people come and go. There are some people that just stop abruptly or take breaks or whatever. Yeah. Do you think Lance will get fired from Aston Martin? I think it's highly unlikely. Not with Lawrence still there. I don't think he would really, unless Lance gets fed up with it and just gets bored. Because with the amount of money he's got plenty of other options to him about what he wants to do with himself. I mean, Nicholas Latifi, and when this was pointed out on Twitter, there's been total radio silence from him since last year. He's not racing anything. He hasn't posted on Instagram or any social media since last year. But then he's got billions behind him, so he's probably just living on a yacht, living his best life without a care in the world at the moment. But Lance, yeah, I think that's Lance's decision. His dad is not good. I don't think he would appreciate saying, "Oh, you're my son, but I have to drop you for the interest of the team because you're not good enough." But yeah. Marigold asks, "What story or team would you like to cover, but there isn't enough information to do them?" It's hard to think of one specifically, because there are probably a bunch of teams from, say, the 60s or 70s that were backmarkers that could be quite interesting to cover, but because of how long ago they are, the sources for information is much harder to find, because this is pre-internet, and it was the case with drivers with a lot of things to do with racing back then. The only records and sources you have for people's careers or race results come from magazines and newspapers. Off the top of my head, I suppose one that I wouldn't mind covering, maybe Kojima. That could be one, because they raced in the Japanese Grand Prix in the mid-70s, and they built, I think their first race, they actually qualified 10th, which is pretty good. So maybe I'll look into Kojima, see if I can do a real deep dive into them, because I'm guessing it wouldn't surprise me if that's an outfit that's done a bunch of stuff like Super Formula and touring cars in Japan before F1. It wouldn't surprise me. Do you think Leclerc will win a championship with Ferrari? No. He's wasting his time. He's far too talented to be putting up with everything they're doing with strategies and car development and whatnot. So no, he's wasting his time. He needs to leave Ferrari and go somewhere better. It's just a shame there aren't many other places that are better, that are viable, really. But you never know what may happen in the future or who may abruptly retire. Can Jordan win the title in '99 without the anti-stall accident? No. Eddie Irvine could have won it without that very suspicious pit stop, but not with the... No, they still... Frentzen, I think he would have had to win the last two races as well to take the title. And they were nowhere near the constructors because Damon Hill was just kind of useless in '99. But yeah. Jammy Dodger, do you think the 2022 regulations for the current F1 cars are working, or do you think the regulations need changing? Okay, well, I covered that a little bit earlier. I think by and large, the cars can follow each other better, but there is still the problem of people don't want to spend too long on someone's tail because it wears the tyres out, which I can't stand. We're getting to the point where DRS is maybe not entirely necessary at some circuits. And the car, yeah, we're doing ground effects, but we're not doing like full ground effects because the front and rear wings are still huge and that. If we went back to like proper full-on 1980s ground effect, I would love that to come back. I can understand there's safety concerns and the cars broke a lot and whatnot. but that would be fun. But yeah, I said obviously my manifesto, I want to completely blow the regulations open and open it up a lot more because it's just too restrictive. I mean, I don't like the way these cars look because when they first turned up, I was like, oh, they kind of have this futuristic thing going, and I guess the Ferrari looks nice, but the rest of them, these giant wings and these big like duck-billed noses, and they all look, aside from the side pods, they all look pretty much the same. It's just I'm not a fan of the way these ones look. Maybe in 10 years I'll appreciate them more because I remember thinking the 2010 era cars were hideous, and now I'm like they actually look all right, even the step nose ones. But they do look ancient, those cars, compared to the modern ones because they're very, very tall, very boxy, very narrow. But yeah. If you're FRA president, what rules do you want to change to make F1 better? I will make a video going into detail, but basically the calendar needs to be massively revised. It needs to be much more sustainable. So we need to do Asian leg, European leg, American leg, ending with starting with Australia, ending with Brazil. We need more teams. So I want a 26 car grid. One of those teams, this is quite an interesting idea I've got, is going to be similar to Toro Rosso. It's going to be run by F1 and it's going to serve as an F2 graduate team. So the idea behind that is that the incumbent Formula 2 champion will get an automatic seat with that team if they are not given one by any other teams, and they'll be joined by somebody else, the runner-up or someone else from F2. It does mean that there's a high turnover, but it means that every F2 champion gets at least 1 year in Formula 1 instead of getting what Piastri had and Drugovich now has, where you win it and then your reward is you sit on the sidelines for a year. Basically. So those are a couple of things. The calendar, the car regulations need to be blown open. We need to stop, we need to give less emphasis to inviting random celebrities onto the grid that don't care about F1 and know nothing about it. And we need to do more things to get more fans involved and doing raffles or lotteries so that fans can go and they get all the paddock access, and you can get one that waves the checkered flag and they can meet the drivers or give them the pole position trophy tire, that sort of thing. It's true. There's a lot that needs to change, but I'll make a manifesto to cover this. Would a promotion relegation system between F1 and F2 work for teams? Ooh, that's interesting. So you could almost treat it like Premier League and Conference, or Championship even. It might. You could have some where the ones that get kicked out because there's a new champion coming in. Well, it depends if they can go to F2 if they want. If they haven't already won the championship, they can go back to F2. I don't think most of them want to. But if you were runner up in F2, you get a seat on my new F1 team and lost to the champion. But at the end of the year, they let you go. Most of them would probably think the typical things, either Le Mans, IndyCar, Formula E. But yeah. In what capacity do you think Vettel will return back to the F1 grid? Audi team principal, FIA? He's not going to come back as a driver. I don't think he will. And if he does, like Schumacher and all the others that make comebacks, it's not going to be a very good comeback. He'll have lost a lot of his touch, I think. I don't think he wants that himself. Him being FIA president or even race director, absolutely, I could see Vettel doing that. I couldn't see him being a team principal because that job looks pure hell. And there aren't many ex-Formula 1 drivers and ex-champions that have made their own F1 teams and it's worked out for them. Really, let's be honest. I mean, there's quite a lot. I mean, obviously, like Fittipaldi weren't any good. Surtees wasn't any good. Stewart sucked. Prost sucked. I'm talking about the teams, not the drivers. Brabham was all right, but then he drove for them. He didn't really run the team in that way because he sold it after he retired. Vettel as FIA president, bring it on. I can see that happening. Right, what's the next question? Did Nico Rosberg beat Lewis Hamilton in equal machinery just so he could become a Monaco-based YouTuber? Unironically, yes. He'd made the decision to retire because obviously he'd done what he needed to do, so he'd won the championship. That was his dream. Maybe like everyone else, he thinks, okay, I can't beat Lewis again, so I don't want to keep on with that or not. But yeah, he done what he wanted, and he wanted to spend. He had a family by that point. He wanted to spend more time with them, and like the others, he probably has lots of other passions that he wants to indulge in because. As much as they love this job, I'm sure, and the money is great, they are traveling constantly and it limits a lot of their freedoms in other areas. And there's a lot of things they probably wish they could do that they can't. And once they retire, they have the freedom and the money to do that. So, yeah, being a Monaco based YouTuber, I think, is one of them. His YouTube channel. I watch it. I mean, I remember he was doing that podcast a few years ago and he was making them wear those headphones that had the wires hanging off really awkwardly, and they were like sat forward on the sofa, and I was like, this is not working. But he's great. I love him as a pundit. He's so good in the commentary box because his insight is really good because he's a recent F1 driver. Hell of a lot better than like Paul di Resta in that. Yeah. Which three Akis Mikon asks, which three specific drivers would you consider as the best, worst, and most underrated in F1 history? One of each category. Oh, yeah, a lot of difficult questions. Best driver. Okay, this question is kind of forbidden. Like, you're not. A lot of people say, "Oh, you can't answer that because you can't compare different eras." Okay, let's try and compare different eras, because if you put people like Verstappen or Hamilton in the 1950s cars, they probably wouldn't be able to drive them at the same capacity that people like Ascari and Farina and Fangio could, because they're not used to it. It takes a different kind of skill and technique to drive them. Like, the steering is much heavier. There's far less... there's no downforce at all. Very little mechanical grip. And they're also, the endurance and the stamina, the fitness you need is different. I mean, a lot of the drivers in the 50s, they weren't particularly trim, but they were still quite hardy because the races were much longer, and the cars, because the steering was so heavy, you would and you'd be sat there banging around in the cockpit as well. You'd be really quite beaten up at the end, assuming you didn't crash. I think also because it would be the confidence to drive it at that kind of speed in something which is, if you crashed, you could die. Whereas these days, there's not that. It takes a truly freak accident to have someone even injured in a modern F1 car. That's why it's difficult to compare them. But the principle is the same in terms of you play with the cards you're dealt, and you compete against who you have to compete against. And, Hamilton, Schumacher, incredibly dominant, long periods of success. The same with Fangio. Jim Clark would have had more periods of dominance if he hadn't died. In terms of I'm going to say Jim Clark for best driver ever, because he had so many just unbelievable drives where he was just I mean, the Spa 63, 64, when he was driving one-handed without fifth gear and he still lapped the entire field nearly. Yeah, I'll just say Jim Clark for best. For worst, well, the meme one for worst is going to be Taki Inoue, but he is definitely not the worst F1 driver in history. People like to say Jean-Denis Delatraz. Again, he was just very, very underprepared. And it's the same thing with people like Yuji Ide, is that he was not necessarily a bad driver. It's just that he was very, very underprepared for Formula One, because both of them have done reasonably well outside of Formula One in their careers. But I don't know. To be honest, when it comes to worst driver, there's over 800 of them. There's probably going to be somebody in the 1950s, back when there were lots of amateur drivers that shouldn't have been there and was really like 30 seconds off the pace or something. Most underrated. Oh. That is difficult. Someone mentioned Stefan Beloff. He obviously his career was cut short, and he had so many setbacks, having to drive a non-turbocharged car that was illegal and got disqualified from all the races. Very good endurance racer. He's a champion, but he gets kind of ignored. I covered Jody Scheckter, so maybe I think Jody Scheckter I could say as being underrated. He gets kind of overlooked because he was very, very crash prone in his first couple of years. He caused several big accidents, including Silverstone 1973. That was the largest accident in Formula One history until Spa 1998. but then he matured a lot, and it was kind of the 1979 season was kind of a bit of a brain over brawn thing with him and Villeneuve, because Villeneuve's thing was he always just wanted to win races no matter what, and so he was always driving at 100%. Whereas Scheckter would be a bit safer, and wouldn't necessarily push for the win if he didn't have to. He wouldn't push the car beyond its limits. And obviously they had a car that was extremely reliable for the time, and so that was basically what got him the title. And he had even before that, he had very good results. I mean, he was runner-up in 77 and third in 76 in the Tyrrell six-wheeler. I'll just say Julius Scheckter, because there are so many others, it's hard to say, to be honest, that you could say that were underrated. Okay. Hay fever, getting a runny nose. Which team do you think will perform best in 2026 with the new regulations? I don't have much to go off with that. But I would say, well, whoever's been doing engine prep the longest, because that seems to have been the key with Mercedes in particular. It's I mean, Mercedes were preparing for a good few years before 2014, and that paid off for them. I'm just going to say Red Bull. If it's very aero heavy, it's going to be Red Bull, assuming Adrian Newey is still there, I think. Yeah. Dorky Nerd asks, how much more successful do you think Lotus version and HRT would have been if the budget cap was introduced in 2010, and do you think they would still be around today? I don't think they would, because I don't think any team would be around. It was, what, $40 million? Like, that is minuscule. That's, I mean, the salaries of a lot of drivers combined go above that. It would have made things closer. I guess the others would have been limited, so there wouldn't have been such a big gap. But you think even off like HRT's budget was 40 million, and that was barely enough for them to keep going. And the others would have really suffered. It was like 250 million, I think, was the budgets for Red Bull and McLaren, which was already a lot smaller than 2007, 2008, when they were on like 500-600 million. The closest they could have got to being around, Manor came very, very close to making it to 2017. Obviously, they lost that prize money for finishing 11th at the last minute into 2016. But they had a wind tunnel model of their car, and it looked pretty decent. HRT were barely scraping by, so they weren't. Caterham kind of fashioned themselves as a professional outfit, but they had all these turmoil and politics going on behind the scenes, and they were obviously frustrated by the fact that they'd made hardly any progress in 4 years, and then they got beaten by Marussia, and that just kind of killed it. Yeah. Ignacio Sagone asked, do you think Mark Webber should have gone to Ferrari in 2014? I don't know if that was I don't remember if there were rumors at the time that might happen, or if he was always set on retiring completely at the end of 2013. If he had gone, presumably that would have been instead of Kimi. He would have been absolutely bodied by Alonso. And then he would have been in the interesting position where, with Vettel joining in 2015, he would have ended up being teammates with him again. So if he had gone there, I get the feeling either Vettel would have then not joined them in 2015, or he would have then left because he knew Vettel was coming in. And we could have ended up with... And if Alonso stayed, you would have ended up with Vettel-Alonso at Ferrari, which would have been really good, really cool. Yeah, I think by that point he would have been 12 years into his career, so he may have only stayed for like a year and probably thought, well, the car's shit, so I'm not going to bother. Um, what was your favorite video to make, and what is your best work? I think my best video overall, and the one that seems to be very popular, is the Turbo Era one. I wasn't expecting that one to do as well as it did, but it's still consistently getting lots of views. People seem to really like that one. It says everything it needs to say. Presentation is good, editing is good. It's still relatively concise but detailed, so it's 40 minutes long, covering a 10-year time period roughly. I like those ones where I can just do general history rather than having to go deep in with rankings and here's every pit stop and every overtake in a race. My favorite video to make, well, the iceberg ones were fun just because you're covering loads of different stuff and you're covering a lot of very silly things as well, and you can mess around with those ones a bit more. The big ones that do well, like I don't enjoy, they do well and people love them, but they take a long time to make and it's quite painstaking work, particularly in the latter stages when you're trying to rush to get to a deadline. The Vettel biography video, that was hell because I'd set myself the deadline of getting it out before the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. And so I had this, and I got started on it later than I should, and so I had to write this 40,000 word script and then get all the pictures and everything and then make sure it was all correct and then record it, and I got it in just in time, but that was hell because I had that big deadline for it. But everyone, again, that's one of my best words. Actually, I really like what I did at the end of that one, when I've got the conclusive bit is when I'm reading out his retirement speech and showing images from across his career that match. I think I did the editing well on that one. So yeah, go check the Vettel video out if you've got a spare 2 hours and recap on his career. Do you watch BTCC? The hybrid power thing has killed it, just like F1's killed it. I used to watch BTCC. So actually, one of the first video games I used to play was Tokka 2 Touring Cars, and that covers the 1998 season. That was like the first racing game I played. I absolutely love that game. That kind of fueled a lot of my interest in racing because when I was a kid, I was more interested in road cars and homologation race cars. I wasn't really interested in single seaters. And I watched a little bit. I mean, every once in a while I'll put it on just while it's on because it's on ITV on the weekends and that. But I don't pay attention. Like I know a handful of drivers' names. I don't know if Jason Plato's still doing it. It wouldn't surprise me. He's been doing it for, nearly 30 years now. I didn't know they were using hybrids, but that seems to be the way a lot of things were going. That's one thing I would do. In my manifesto, if I was going to change F1 up, I would scrap hybrid engines and say you can either have a 3-litre naturally aspirated V10 or a 1.5-litre turbocharged V10, both of which are going to be running on synthetic carbon-neutral fuels. I think that pleases everyone, basically. Hopefully. Right, what's the next question? Formula Shorts, what's your opinion on the current points scoring system? Since cars nowadays are more reliable, do we need to start giving points from P1 to 12 or 15 so the other teams have something to fight for? No, I don't think there's anything wrong with the current points system. I think it's expansive enough, and it still gives you a reasonably good opportunity to score points while also making it challenging. Because, for example, I've said this a few times, early 90s, 26 car grids, only the top 6 score points. At first, that sounds unfair, but then when you realise that most of the cars never worked at the best of times, if you were in something like a Eurobrew, not that they ever qualified, or one of the backmarker teams that had to go through pre-qualifying and just about scraped their way onto the grid, if you could keep the car on track and if the gearbox held out, there was a reasonable chance that you might score points, because you'd be lucky if more than 10 drivers finished a race because the cars just broke down and there were so many pay drivers that crashed all the time. So yeah, I don't think... I do sometimes wonder if maybe they should think about giving a point, maybe 1 point for pole position, just to give it some kind of value. But I think the current point system is fine. So on the PS1, spanking around Brands Hatch and the Renault Laguna, Plato retired. He retired last season. Yeah, okay, because he's going for donkey's years. It did puzzle me with Tokka 2 Touring Cars because in that the Renault is the fastest car. Well, the cars are all basically as fast as each other in the game. I mean, it's not particularly accurate in that sense. But it was Ricard Rydell that won the title, but he's always running around in the middle in the game, and that puzzled me a little bit when I looked up the real life results. But yeah. Who are your best and worst Sky F1 pundits? The best pundits. Okay, well, Nico Rosberg is Nico Rosberg and Martin Brundle are the best ones from Sky. They're both fantastic. They know what they're talking about, and because they've been doing this for years, they're both former drivers. Let's think. Worst. It's hard to say because the thing is there are loads of there are a couple of new ones who I haven't seen much of, and I mean, so it's hard to say. There's that. I mean, I won't say something like Bernie Collins is brand new. I'd never heard of her, but she seems fine. Naomi Schiff is all right. Paul di Resta, he's gone now, but I guess he was kind of annoying sometimes. Yeah, I want to see Eddie Jordan. I don't know if he ever did Sky, but because I want to see him come back because he was always fun. I liked the classic BBC lineup of Jake Humphries, David Coulthard, and Eddie Jordan. That was a good trio back in the day. The Cucumber is by far the worst. Is Narain Carter-Kayan a pundit for Sky Sports? Like, I didn't know. Okay, I don't know who the Cucumber is referring to because that usually refers to Narain Carter-Kayan. Who needs to go on Beyond the Grid? I haven't seen him yet. We got Giancarlo Fisichella on, but recently they've been doing a lot of repeats of, like, they've been doing Bottas and Leclerc and people that have been on like 3 or 4 times, and fucking Christian Horner's been on it again. I've still got a list of drivers that they haven't done yet that they should. Oh, Ted Kravitz. Oh, no, Crofty. I don't know if he counts as a pundit, but I can't stand Crofty. He's such an annoying commentator. If he counts as a pundit, then Crofty's the worst. I'd get rid of him in a heartbeat from Sky. And put Alex Jakes in his place. Oh, God, I'm still only on the first page of questions. I need to get through these a bit faster because it's been nearly an hour. Durab, why is your voice genuinely so smoothing and relaxing? I love it. I get this a lot. People compliment me on my voice, which I find very interesting because I used to be before I was doing this, I didn't often hear my voice much, and I was quite shy about it and everything, and quite nasal. I suppose this is my kind of conversational voice is obviously different to my script reading voice, as you can hear now. But yeah, people have complimented. I mean, I met Aldas a few months back, and he said you've got like the perfect voice for F1 and that, and other people have said it, and I guess it works. I mean, people say they like to fall asleep to my videos, and sometimes I'm not sure if that's a compliment or not, but I guess I'll take it. I mean, to be fair, I've done this. There have been some nights where I will put one of my videos on, and I'll sit there and just listen, and it does make you. It's some kind of psychological thing. It does make you drift off. And so sometimes I'll use that to help me because I think because I'm talking continuously for long periods of time as well, it just helps you to drift off, I guess. Next question. Cristiano Ubaldi asks, if all the drivers of all time in their prime will do a race together, who will win? This is another one basically saying who's the best driver. Oh. Well, it's hard to say. Well, there are too many factors at play with a question like that. It's like, okay, are they all driving the same car? If so, what car is it? And it's like, yeah, the ones that are especially good, like people like Schumacher, Vettel, Hamilton, Verstappen, they're all equally good at controlling a race from the front and just leading from the front. And to be honest, anyone is. And then there are ones that could fight, that were fighters, like sometimes Hamilton and Senna and Clark and that, where they could crawl their way through if they had to. I'll just say Schumacher, because he would pump out endless qualifying laps if he had to, basically. It marks 30 years to the month since James Hunt died. How do you think his career would have gone if he continued racing or joined McLaren earlier when Fittipaldi raced for them in the 70s? Okay, well, he only really got that title on a technicality. I mean, everyone knows, I think, at least that Nicky Lauda should have won it in '76. Had his accident not happened, he would have. He obviously very nearly won it in the final round. And I'm hearing rumors again, apparently, that it was planned that he would. I think the idea was that it was planned before the race that he was going to retire from Fuji, and I think James Hunt was meant to as well, but he didn't, and so he gets the title. And every time I've rejigged the points system, to use original points or modern points, it goes to Lauda in '76. Obviously, he's not terrible as a driver, James Hunt, because you have to have a certain minimum standard of driving ability to be a champion. He just didn't. I don't think he was committed enough. He was such a playboy. He wasn't. He just gave up because the car wasn't good, and he obviously just wanted to go off and have fun. But then he ended up becoming surprisingly normal after he retired, because he just went into commentary and that. But he is. I haven't made any attempts to say rank every champion, because that's basically like saying to ranking all the best drivers. I will do a shout out, actually. There is a smaller channel who it's Nedso's F1 Grid Box Fastcast. He's actually he's made a video trying to rank every champion. He's only done the first half of it. I don't know if he's put it up the next one, but that's a small channel. Check him out, because his videos are similar to mine. He does long form historical stuff, and he's attempting to rank every champion. But yeah, I think, for the record, for me, the two worst champions are James Hunt and Phil Hill, because they basically won their titles. Maybe not so much Phil Hill, but like obviously Von Trips died, and he could well have won it instead of him. And Phil Hill has what, 5? Is it 3 or just 5 career wins or something? Yeah, hard to say who the best is, but yeah. Have you ever thought that if you reach 100k that you'd rank every driver in history? It has popped around in my head, is that maybe one day I should just try and rank every driver. If you gave me 6 months, and if I could make a video that was 10 hours long, then I would rank every driver. Sometimes I had considered this, breaking it into several parts, obviously, because there's over 800 drivers we're talking about. And the thing is, I would have to do separate lists, as I had with the 90s. I'd have to have a separate list for drivers that entered a Grand Prix but never started one, and there's close to 100 of them. And then I would need to have one. I don't know if I would include Indy 500 drivers, because I do wish the Indy 500 wasn't on the calendar in the 50s, because it messes the stats up. Because it's not Formula One. It wasn't sanctioned by the FIA. Hardly any drivers went from Indy to F1 or from F1 to Indy. It's got nothing to do with it, but they're there on the lists. That added a massive chunk when I did the video ranking every F1 driver by career points, because at the beginning there was a ton of American drivers from the 50s. Yeah, I need to think about how I do it, but yeah, I could maybe, if I felt there was a demand for that and if I thought it would do well. KK Rosberg won one race when he was champion. Yeah, he did win one race. Bear in mind, that was nobody won more than 2 races in '82. It was a very inconsistent season. He also wasn't in a turbocharged car, so he had a massive power disadvantage. And yeah, he only won 5 races. I say KK Rosberg, he's at the lower end of the F1 champions in terms of how good they are, but I think he's better than a lot of people think he is. He was extremely fast, but he just broke a lot of his cars. It was the thing. Would you consider doing a full video on how every season would go without the World Championship driver and the constructor of every point system? Maybe. This is there are stats videos which are similar to will sum up the whole history in 10 minutes, and it just shows a chart that increases. And they have done ones, they've done seasons without the champion, and it shows you, for example, what 2021 looked like without Verstappen and Hamilton. I think, and that. Yeah, I could. The thing is, that would take forever, because I'd have to go through every single race, discount the champion, and then update the race results and add points in. It would. The thing is, the win would just inevitably go to the runner-up, so it wouldn't be that. There wouldn't be many like surprise results, I don't think. Um, do you remember why back in the 1980 McLaren had the usual red and white car, but one time an F1 car was allowed to have two liveries, different colours? Yellow and white, that was Portugal 84, 85. 84 was when Lauda won the title there. I don't remember why, but I'm guessing it was something to do with sponsorship reasons, because Marlboro cigarettes, maybe they couldn't do that in Portugal. I don't remember the reasons why. Who do you think was a better driver, Prost or Lewis? I lean towards Prost as he outscored every single teammate, legends like Lauda, Keke, Senna included. Yeah, this is the thing. Prost is underrated, and he gets seen a lot, he gets seen by some people as the villain between him and Senna. He was more methodical. He maybe wasn't as interesting to watch as Senna, who was very bombastic and kind of balls to the wall in his driving style and that. But Prost was much more methodical. He thought things through a lot more. And yeah, he remains undefeated by any of his teammates. As we saw from using the modern point system, he wins 7 championships and he comes within 10 points of winning 8 or 9. Like, he was just all that there. Yeah, I mean, even in real life, he came very close to winning like 2 or 3 more. Yeah, he just Prost is one that he gets overlooked, I think, but you can't deny he was more or less the full package. I mean, I understand he wasn't the best qualifier, but there was a very good reason, because he set the cars up for race pace, which makes perfect sense. If he could have somehow combined being an amazing qualifier with how good he was in races, then people might view him differently. But yeah. Next question. Ben Johnston, do the cars need to be made smaller and lighter to encourage better racing? Does Kimi stick around as long as he did if he isn't world champion? So the regulations, I think smaller and lighter would help, because there's less of a wake behind them. At Monaco, it would definitely help. They don't need to be that much smaller. I mean, you could go back to maybe 2008, even 2010 spec. But yeah, I think it would help if they were made smaller, and there's room to make them smaller, because when you see a lot of these size comparisons with old cars, the back end of the car is like the length from cars like 30 years ago, the length from the rear wing to the driver's seat is not changed much. It's the front half that's got much longer, and they can just shrink that up a little bit. Then yeah, they can be made smaller. Does Kimi stick around if he was never champion? Probably. I mean, he stuck around. He already won his title, and he still stuck around. Even with, obviously, researching it, I'm coming increasingly to the conclusion that Ferrari were deliberately sabotaging him in 2008. And he's still committed, and then he came back a few years later. He will have known driving for Ferrari from 2014 with Vettel that he was the number 2. And I guess he only won 1 race with them. He seemed cool with that. Alfa Romeo, he just was completely fed up by that point. I think he might just stick around, because he might have thought, I got nothing better to do, and so yeah. Maybe not quite as long. He might have given up faster, but yeah, why not? I'm getting so many people asking who the GOAT is. I need to skip some of these. John Yassarian, did Simtech have the potential to become a midfield threat like Jordan or Ligier if the mystery sponsor Nick Worth said pulled out had actually stayed the course? Apparently they wanted Betrezi, which would have been interesting. Also, is Ricardo Rosset underrated? And do you think of Ed Straw as an inspiration for your content, as you both seem to enjoy underfunded teams run by hobbyists and lunatics? Simtech... I haven't done a deep dive into Simtech. I probably should, because after I did my 2-part series on Pacific, Simtech was probably the obvious choice to go next. But yeah, well, if it gives them lots of money, I think they could, to be honest, because Nick Worth, the car was reasonably well designed. I mean, Nick Worth, he was with Virgin. He kind of pioneered computational fluid dynamics. He designed the car that eventually became Andrea Moda's car, and that car, it's not as bad as people think it is, because Roberto Moreno, he did qualify in Monaco, and he didn't qualify last, and so the car was somewhat drivable. The problem they had is that it was being run by shoemakers and a corrupt mafia boss. If an actual team had that car, they could have been around. This is 92, so Scuderia Italia, who the lower end teams that year, they could have been lower back markers, but actually qualifying for races and doing all right. Simtek, yeah. I think the 94 car was bad, but David Brabham drove it quite well, and he could be fairly racy at times. Yeah, I think they would have been around a bit longer if they just needed more money, and also losing Roland Ratzenberger 3 races in obviously was really not good for them. They wanted Petresi. I don't think Petresi would have stayed on. He retired in 93. He was in his 40s by then. I don't know if he would have wanted to stuck around. Ricardo Rossi is not underrated. He's awful. Like, I was just looking back at this when I ranked him in the 90s videos. He's one of the lowest ranked drivers that actually did a full season. And yeah, he was just bad. Do I think of Ed Straw as an inspiration? He's from the race, isn't he? I don't pay attention to him specifically. I watch some of the stuff that the race have done. I like most of their videos, and I've taken inspiration from a few things. I want to know where they get their images from, because they're really good images. I did notice they stole one of my video ideas, because they did their own video ranking every driver of the 2010s. I mean, my one, I might do that one again, because I made that like 3 years ago. It's not really that good. It needs to be done again, I think, and it needs refining, both in terms of the rankings and in terms of the presentation and the audio. But they did theirs as well. Theirs was only like 20 minutes long, whereas mine is over an hour long. And I loved that I saw so many comments for the video just saying, "Oh, Peter Brook's done this already," and that. I loved that. Yeah. Let's see. What are your thoughts on Jamie Chadwick? Lots of clueless F1 fans saying she'd be an F1 when she's lost in the equivalent of F2 in IndyCar for the first best team on the grid. So, no, she's not good enough for F1, Jamie Chadwick. When it comes to women in F1, the thing is that you need to be... In the junior formulas, you need to be winning races and you need to be winning championships. And at the moment, there aren't any female drivers that are doing that. You've got people like the Alcobaisi sisters or Tatiana Calderon or Sophia Flörsch, and they're running at or near the back in things like F2, F3, F4 and that. F1 Academy, I mean, that series is dead already because they're not broadcasting it. So it's almost worse than the W Series. I think the W Series was just a distraction in terms of their careers. Because I'm not saying that you need to compete against men because they're men. It's that you need to be competing in the F2 and F3 because that's where all the best drivers have gone. And the thing with Jamie Chadwick is, okay, she had the British GT title before the W Series. So she had, whereas most of the other girls that competed in the W Series had not won any titles and not even any races. And she raced in Frecker in 2020. And she was running in the midfield in a small and very uncompetitive grid of Gianluca Petikov, Surname Merchant, Oliver Rasmussen, Pierre-Louis Chauvet. Like, it's not the most competitive thing. But people got excited with Jamie Chadwick because she'd won a couple of titles and then because she dominated the W Series. Yeah, but no, you need someone like people saw potential in Juju Noda because she did really well in karting, but then she's kind of flopped in single seaters. And some of the younger ones, I mean, Iris Sidorkova, she seemed okay because she was only 17 or 18, so she had plenty of years to develop and that. But then obviously she's Russian, so that became she couldn't race for a while and all of that. So I think women in F1, I'm not convinced they can't do it. I just think because there are relatively few women going into motorsport, there's a much smaller pool to select for in terms of people that are good enough. Because even the worst F1 drivers are still really, really good drivers. This is the thing. It's easy to forget because you'll see the gaps and you think, oh, but then it's the top 20 drivers. Like in most other lower series, they would still do really well. This is the thing. And again, most of the girls in W Series and F1 Academy, they're still really good drivers, but the skill ceiling just goes so high, and some of them hadn't reached it, and others maybe just weren't going to. Yeah, I think it happens. And I think the teams know this because if they were going to select a woman for talent, obviously having a woman on the team is PR gold. But they haven't been given proper race seats because I think they know the ones they've had. We've seen in the past, like Simona de Silvestro, Carmen Yorda, like they're not good enough to drive, but it looks good to have them in the team for PR to say, oh, we've got a woman on the team. But we need, it's that they're not. Eventually, there will be. I think that there are so many pushes to get more women involved, and obviously we have had female F1 drivers in the past. I mean, 5, only 2 of them actually started a race. But Lella Lombardi, she did half a season. She scored half a point. She was near the back, but she definitely could have been worse. She wasn't like completely out of touch and out of her league. And that, so yeah, I would say, I think by the end of the decade, I think we might have seen one. I think certainly, because there's such a push for it. We'll just have to see. But yeah, it's a touchy subject, I think, obviously talking about women in motorsport and that. Who are some of the channels on YouTube that inspired you to create your own channel? So my in terms of Formula One, the main one that inspired me was Aldas. Because he was around 2017, 2018. He was one of the first F1 YouTubers. Before him, I don't have many memories of people that were actually making original content that wasn't to do with the games. Beyond, there's a guy called Alex Zaafro, and he was making videos like nearly 10 years ago. He was one of the first doing in the kind of modern style that we have now. But Aldas, he did his series The Downfall of McLaren, and that was in several parts. And I was like, okay, these are long form videos and people like to hear that. So there's definitely a market to make long, high detail stuff, and I could do what he did, but for backmarker teams, that could be fun. He's the main F1 channel. Josh Revel as well. Those are the 2 main ones I guess I've taken inspiration from for my channel from F1. There are a bunch of, because I watch YouTube constantly, and there was a lot of stuff unrelated to F1 that I watched. So I've taken inspiration as well from channels. There are 2 channels that talk about maritime history called Ocean Liner Designs and Part-Time Explorer, and they do like hour-long videos covering like famous ships and stuff. Definitely those. They use animations in their videos, and I really, really wish I could do this. Instead of having to depend on pictures and race footage, was if I could make high detail 3D animations to replicate what I'm talking about. If I had the means and the skill to do that, I absolutely would. There's a channel called Bedtime Stories, which does videos about like aliens and UFOs and mysterious disappearances and cryptids and stuff. And it's all like these really eerie hand-drawn illustrations. I've taken a bit of inspiration in terms of script writing and delivery from that. And there's ones about like there's one about aviation called Mentor Pilot, and he's a airline pilot that does videos about famous plane crashes and explains everything in detail. So I take inspiration from those. But yeah, in terms of Formula One, the 2 main ones are Aldas and Josh Revel, I think. Yeah. Do you watch any other sports apart from motorsport? Not really, no. I only follow football very loosely, so I don't pay attention to club football. I love the World Cup and I love the Euros. I love the Olympics. I'll watch Wimbledon when it's on. But otherwise, I don't follow any other sports seriously. So this is the only Formula One is the only one where I actually like know a lot about it and I watch each race and everything. Right. Max DeGraff, what's your all-time favorite F1 race? Congratulations, by the way, you completely deserve this of the amazing stories. Thank you. My favorite race ever. Off the bat, 3 of my favorite races are Canada 2011, Brazil 2012, and Germany 2019. All wet races, all crazy ones. Probably Brazil, I think. It had everything. That Brazil 2012, obviously you had that huge, literal spin plot twist at the beginning with Vettel getting spun round at the start and just about surviving and being able to carry on. There was so much, the weather kept changing and everyone was pitting at funny times and changing conditions. There were safety cars. HRT got into the top 10 at one point. and then Vettel ends up being champion. Obviously, it ended a bit anticlimactically, and people have pointed this in terms of Abu Dhabi that they ended it under a safety car. But that race had it all. I mean, 2012 in general had it all. It was just such a good season. Honest thoughts on Ido Cohen. Genuinely thought he'd be decent, but he has clearly flopped in F3. Yeah, Ido Cohen is useless. He is getting worse and worse. He's been around for a few years now, but he's just crashing. I mean, there are so many drivers in F3 that are just a waste of space. In particular, there are a couple of F2 is always going to have a handful of like useless pay drivers, but F3 seems to have these in abundance. And when you're in like the bottom 10 in a 30 car grid, you have no chance of making any progress unless your name is Pepe Marti. Apparently, he's one of many just really not good drivers in Formula 3 that aren't going to make it into Formula 1, and their destiny lies either in LMP2 or Ferrari Challenge Europe, something like that. You made a video of Fabio Lima. Would you consider making videos on Giorgio Pantano and Davide Valsecchi to complete the trio of GP2 champions? I probably should, to be honest, because I did him because of the three, he's the one that no one really remembers at all. And I think it's also because he doesn't race. He stopped racing a few years ago, and it was just interesting to have a GP2 champion whose Formula 1 career just flopped so badly. Giorgio Pantano, he stopped racing, I think, about 5 years ago. He runs a karting team in Italy. Davide Valsecchi, obviously, he still does the F2 commentary. Does he? I don't know if he still races, but he's still active in the community. Yeah, maybe I should, because I haven't really touched. I should expand and maybe start doing videos on a few other. Maybe I don't know much about it. I could cover IndyCar. I could cover a few things outside of F1, particularly if I start running out of ideas for Formula 1. See, Yash Paranyape asks your thoughts on IS and Senna. Senna, okay. Obviously a generational talent. I mean, all of his pre-F1, his junior career results were exemplary. And again in F2, he was consistently very, very strong. Very committed. I understand he has this sort of mythic persona to him because he took this kind of philosophical and almost spiritual approach to driving. Immensely popular in Brazil. I totally understand why, because he's their most successful driver, and he's far less obviously Nelson Piquet often says things that gets himself in trouble and that, and against Senna as well. But you have to. There were always going to be disagreements, because in my 90s ranking video, I ranked him as number 1 and I ranked Schumacher second, and loads of people were saying that Schumacher be number 1. The reason Schumacher was not number 1 was because of Adelaide 94 and Jerez 97. Because, okay, him and Senna, they both used to pull those kind of tricks, but Schumacher did it more. And that's why, basically. And yeah, obviously Senna, he is going to be tarnished. I mean, the more you look at it, when you look at what happened Suzuka 1990, how out of order that is. Because if that happened today, if that happened, say, Abu Dhabi 2021, whoever was driving into the other driver would have been, well, they said this before the race anyway, they would have been disqualified from the championship and probably lost their license. Because the thing is, another thing that alarms me, that collision with him and Prost, that's a really, really high speed collision, and the cars were by and large safe, but not safe enough that you couldn't risk serious injury, and they go barreling off into the gravel trap together. It's like one of you could have been seriously hurt in that, because it was such a high speed collision. Yeah, it was those kind of dirty tactics which, I mean, I think he sometimes gets. It's so easy to say he's the best driver, but yeah, if he hadn't done that, I think I'd have a little bit more respect for Senna. Although he is obviously one of the best. I mean, there's no denying that. He just, yeah. What's next? Have you ever Big Man Pat? Have you ever taken a sabbatical from watching F1? I personally didn't watch much after 2016 for about 3 years because I thought the cars were shit. I've never taken any full-on sabbaticals in terms of not watching it at all. I was at uni from 2012 to 2016, and then again from 2017 to 2019. And I don't think I watched a huge amount. 2014 I was watching, but that was a miserable year because the cars looked shit, they sounded shit, Mercedes were dominating, most of the races weren't good. Then Jules Bianchi has his crash. 2015, I watched hardly any of 2015, because it was just like really, yeah. The races were just so boring. There was little to no title fight because Rosberg could not keep up with Lewis. There was one good race, so I don't have a huge. I don't remember much about 2015. I got back into it in 2016 because that was a much better year. I really struggled to remember 2017. That's the interesting thing. Like I remember watching Singapore because I just started my master's degree, and then from 2018 onwards, I've been watching avidly again. But yeah, it was patchy from 2014 to 2017. But otherwise, I've been watching. I've missed probably 10 races at the most, and most of that is because they're ones that are on very early in the morning or whatever. What would have happened to Mark Webber went to Ferrari to replace Massa? I answered that early, but basically I think he would have been shat all over by Alonso and probably quit after 1 year because the car wasn't very good and because Vettel was coming in 2015. Okay. Mitch the Desert Squiddo's gaming channel. Will there be a different driver other than a Red Bull one to win a race this year? I'm fed up with the season being more like Formula Red Bull. Also, do you think Formula E and IndyCar are more entertaining than F1 right now? I answered the F1, the Red Bull thing before. There is every reason to believe that Aston Martin or Mercedes could win a race if things go kaput with Red Bull. Because the thing is that if Verstappen, say, has an engine failure from the lead, he needs Perez to be running in second, and he's not doing that at the moment. To take the lead. So if it goes up tits up for Max, then one of them could inherit the lead. So yeah, maybe one could do it. Yeah. Is Formula E and IndyCar better? Yeah, overall the races are more entertaining because they tend to be more unpredictable, and I think a lot of that is because they're spec series. I mean, good luck in Formula E in particular. It feels like anyone could win that because it's good luck being consistent. It just changes so much, and they don't have the same obsession with tires and everything else. I mean, they don't even do pit stops, do they? In Formula E, IndyCar, I'm definitely enjoying IndyCar. It's a different kind of racing. Overall, I'd say yeah, because there are a lot more overtakes. The thing is, Formula One is always going to come out on top regardless of how it's going because Formula One is the pinnacle of motorsport, and it has this prestige and this history that the others just don't have, especially Formula E because it's quite new. Should F1 have spec cars? Asks Spiffy. On that topic, no, it should not. That's the primary thing that distinguishes Formula One from every other single-seater series is that it is not a spec series, and it's that's been the main driving force is the innovation by having different teams racing, and designing their own cars. That's all. That it's a thing. Strictly speaking, the Constructors' Championship is the main thing because that's what the teams are building cars for. But I understand that for the fans, we're more interested in what the drivers are doing, and the Drivers' Championship. No, I don't want Formula One becoming a spec series because at that point, how is it any different from like Formula 2 or Formula 3? It takes out so much of the point of the sport. So yeah, we don't need that happening. How long have you been watching? Penguin Camp asks, how long have you been watching racing, and what was your first experience that turned you onto it? Well, since I was a kid, so I'd say I've been interested in cars, motoring, and motorsport basically my entire life. I wasn't like Formula One is the first sport that I followed. Motorsport I followed really seriously and accrued a large amount of knowledge. Before Formula One, because I played a lot of Gran Turismo, that got me into endurance racing, Le Mans, and I was more into the history of it. And I didn't. Obviously, it happens once a year, so you can't really watch it a lot. And I never watched any of the other endurance races. and I'd watch a little bit of IndyCar. But again, because I was more interested in the cars as a kid, and I had loads of toy cars, and I played so many different racing games. I didn't really watch the racing for the drivers and that. But that changed 2007. Hamilton came along. Formula One starts getting a lot more attention, and because it's free to wear on ITV, so I can watch it. And I watched about half a dozen races. All happened to be good ones. I remember watching Indianapolis, Nürburgring, Fuji, and Brazil, which are all the best races. And then 2008 onwards, I watched it and just got gripped. So I've been doing it, since then. Speaking of Le Mans, did you enjoy the G56 Cup car this year? Is that the Le Mans? Is that the NASCAR? Yeah, that was fun. You may as well throw in something different. I mean, we had 10 years ago. They had that three-wheeler, didn't they? And they like to do that. There's always one car that's a bit different, and it's like, yeah, why not? You can mix them up. I mean, I used to try and like simulate Le Mans in Gran Turismo 4, because you could do the 24-hour race at only 6 cars. I used to make tables, and I would take every high-end racing car in the game, and I would give them an average lap time, and from that I would give myself a rough idea of, if you had a field of 40 cars, how it would go in Gran Turismo 4, even if they're ones that you would never see in racing in Le Mans. So yeah, it's always fun to have something different in. Your thoughts on NASCAR, and do you ever see yourself watching it? I've never watched NASCAR. I don't really want to watch it. Again, I don't really understand overall racing. And so NASCAR, it's not for me. And doing the NASCAR cars in Gran Turismo was an absolute nightmare, because it's oval racing and it's just slipstreaming and you can't hold a lead, and they handle appallingly, because all they need to be able to do is turn left ever so slightly. Do you think Montoya would have won a world title in a better car, and how do you think his career would have gone if he didn't leave F1 2006? Yeah, in a better car he could have won. He was very similar to Verstappen in his first couple of years. I mean, there's that famous, is it 2001 or 2002 Interlagos, when he's battling away with Schumacher, and then he gets taken out by Jos Verstappen. Yeah, very dogged, obviously really knew his stuff, but Williams, their cars just weren't as good as Ferrari. That was his problem. He's in a similar position that Leclerc is in, is that he's in a car, he's basically he's always the bridesmaid and never the bride. He's driving the socks off the second fastest car, instead of like cruising to victories or something. Yeah, quit 2006. 2006 was kind of shaky for him before he walked or / got fired. If we say that he stayed in 2007, because De La Rosa replaced him, I don't know if Alonso would have gone in then if he'd been with Montoya. He may have ended up next to Hamilton, and that would have been very interesting. I don't think, if we say it was Montoya Hamilton at McLaren 2007, I think he probably still would have lost the title to Hamilton, because Alonso tied with him, and obviously Raikkonen won it. I think he's somebody who he could have got. He may have stayed around until about 2010 and then maybe called it quits, but I don't think he would have won a championship. Ivan to Cry asks, who are your 3 favourite F1 drivers who were considered slow in their time in the sport? Well, Narain Karthikeyan, that goes without saying. He's faster than people think he is. He had a perfectly good junior career. He was winning races in British Formula 3, drove for Carlin, and he did Euro Formula by Nissan and Macau and that. So he was perfect. His junior career was good. He had some good performances with Jordan. Obviously, the HRTs were really bad. It didn't help that he was consistently beaten by Liuzzi and De La Rosa. He really suffered. He wasn't particularly good in qualifying, and then in the races, he was often blocking drivers and not very good with red flags and that. But his time testing with Williams was actually quite good. He had very good testing times. Did Narain Karthikeyan. The others that were considered slow, but I like. I'm kind of partial to Sakon Yamamoto. It's an interesting one because he was one of the last of his generation of pay drivers, and he was incredibly slow. And his career, I think he won one race in his professional career before entering F1, but he had a way of sticking around. He was contracted with 6 different teams because he had lots of sponsorship money. But I like him because I've covered his whole. I managed to uncover a lot of details about his career when I did, because I did a video covering it. It's only about 15 minutes long, and now he's a politician, which is quite different for an F1 driver, I guess, or a former F1 driver. But yeah, he's the one that's interesting because he's another perennial backmarker. Alonso signed the McLaren contract December 2005. Oh, okay, that's much earlier than I thought. I would have thought. Okay, so it would have been Alonso and Montoya in 2007. That would have been a really cool lineup. I don't know if they would have still lost the title. I think it may not have been as contentious because I don't think Alonso would, because he wasn't a rookie, so Alonso wouldn't have thought, I'm being beaten by a rookie here. Maybe one of them. I think maybe in that case, maybe Alonso wins the title, but not Montoya. That's a big alternate history thing to do. Have you thought about ranking every race in a certain decade? I have. That would take forever because I have to rewatch every race. That's the problem. One thing I am going to do, because obviously you'll have seen that I've done some videos where I let you do the rankings for me, and I've done that for races and I've done it for drivers. There will be more for drivers by country. I think I am going to do like ranking every race in a season and leave it to everyone else to rank it. And I'll start with last year and go back and back and back and do it that way. Because if I say rank every race in 1950, it's like, well, there's nobody around that watched it in 1950, and you can't find the races anywhere because they weren't broadcast. So yeah, I might do that. But ranking every race in a decade, there's like 200 odd of them, and that would just be the longest video ever, and it would take ages to prep because I'd have to rewatch every single race as well. Yeah. Do you think the European GP should come back in a rotating form? Yeah, I think it should, to be honest. There are several circuits because there's high demand, unsurprisingly, for a lot of European circuits, and there are ones that can't always be on there. So I think it should come back, and you can alternate between Hockenheim, Nürburgring, God forbid, even Valencia if they want to bring that back. Yeah. Have you considered making shorts? You get more exposure, but have to compact your videos out. Well, I've made 2. I've made the ones just summarising what the corner names mean at Interlagos and Silverstone. It's actually very difficult to fit that in under a minute, particularly for me, because I'm very bad at keeping things short and to the point. I did it, and then I just kind of lost interest because I thought, well, they weren't getting many views, and it's not... You don't do shorts for the revenue because the revenue is near to zero, but you would do it for promotion. So, I think when I'm going long periods between videos, probably should do a couple, because they can be made in an afternoon. Do you think Pourchaire will get a seat next year? Yeah, I think so, to be honest. He's the one. Him and Ollie Behrman seem to be the 2 main prospects in F2 everyone's talking about. Zhou Guanyu's driving is fine. It's not terrible. It's not brilliant. It's in the middle. The car break, they seem to be like, he seems to get this thing a lot where they're like, okay, Joe, we need to retire the car because reasons, and they just bring him into the pits for no reason. Bottas has become basically invisible, and so I don't know if he's ever gonna want to come back to stick around doing Alfa Romeo in the like Kimi, because he's just not. I don't even notice him in half the races anymore, and he's maybe he'll just get sick of it now that he's no longer in a decent car. He's in a sort of Giancarlo Fisichella Barrichello phase where they have their period at the top as the number 2, and then their career just crumbles in some midfield car. Do you think Lando Norris should have a better car? Yeah, well, I'd like to see him in something a bit better. Seeing him in George at Mercedes, that'd be fun when Hamilton retires. Because I think you can tell he's getting sick of being stuck in the midfield and finishing 7th every race. But yeah, why not? I think Lando, we can see him. I think what happened at Russia in 2021 kind of broke him and McLaren a bit. And so yeah, we'll see. He's one who I could picture him at the moment. He's in a sort of, if you're going to compare it to British drivers, he's in the sort of Eddie Irvine, Johnny Herbert phase where they're not winning championships, but they can win the odd race here and there, and maybe if they just had a better car. I mean, he doesn't crash nearly as much as they did, but yeah, he's in that sort of era, or maybe even a David Coulthard kind of thing. Has Peter done every question from the community post? Most of them. I've skipped a few because a lot of them are quite similar. Jamie, I think I've got one from you actually, or maybe I've read it out already. Let me think. No, I haven't asked. I feel like there's one on your mess. I'm just hearing the name somewhere else. But yeah, okay. About halfway through the the list of questions I've got written down. So we'll just get going with those because we're going for an hour and a half now. Who do you think are the most exciting prospects? Cicada asks, who do you think are the most exciting prospects at F2 and F3 currently? Well, as I said a few minutes ago, that Teo Porcher and Ollie Behrman are the ones everyone seems to be talking about the most. And yeah, Teo Porcher, he's probably going to get a seat with Alfa Romeo. Ollie Behrman is really doing well, and he's only just turned 18, so he's still young. And that there are some drivers, like Victor Martins has flopped like crazy. Like, he was really good in F3 and Formula Renault, but then he's just, I don't know what the fuck he's doing at the moment because it's just not happening for him in F2. It's kind of Yuri Vips light. Like, the car's fast enough, but things are just going wrong in every possible way. The same, Dennis Hauger, like, he shat all over everyone in F3, and now he's just kind of useless in F2. In F3, I'm not too impressed at the moment because, Gabriel Bortoletto, he's got himself at the top just by being consistent. Whereas, like, Paul Aron is being a bit underwhelming. Dino Beganovic, it's not really landing. But Pepe Marti is doing amazing stuff every so often. So he's one that he's going places, definitely. A lot of the others, they're just like, yeah. And the thing is, these days, you'll be lucky if 2 drivers from F2 get into F1 the following year. So if it's going to be 2 this year, it would be Porcher and Behrman next year, but I don't think Behrman would go in that early. Oh, I did ask Jamie. Yeah, I asked I did answer the Nico Rosberg equal machinery one. Let's see. Oh, John Garcia asks, I have one question for one. As the Wonder Kid, the rising number one wonders, should one only win one in 1 year? Would one want to have that one in round one? That is a, I'm going to say that is a much better press conference question than 30 years ago. Yeah, that was Australia 02-03 to Montoya. I'm surprised he could actually keep it going in terms of, because that's quite a tongue twister even for an English speaker, and you could see in his answer it was kind of ticking over in his head, and he was trying to, I think he just stormed out, but he was just like, what, when he was asking that. I can't even, I'm struggling even just to untangle the question myself. I think, oh yeah, it was basically, yeah, well, if you could only win one race this year, would that have been Australia? I think, yeah. Behrman to Haas. Yeah, actually, Behrman to Haas. I mean, he's a Ferrari junior, isn't he? So Hulkenberg is doing good. Magnussen massively outshone Schumacher, and then Hulkenberg is massively outshining Magnussen. Yeah, why not? Yeah, Behrman to Haas. I can see that happening. Will Andretti, Daniel Kelly asks, will Andretti ever get on the grid? And if so, could they for 2026 for the new regs? Yeah, there's a lot of resistance. If I had a say in it, I would let them in, absolutely. Especially if they're going to do, I'm hoping that they lean on the American thing, because, I mean, Haas is an American team in name only, but let's be honest. They've got their base in America, but then they've got the main bases in Europe for practicality. But what? They got Ferrari engines, Ferrari gearbox, Ferrari suspension. The cars are built by Dallara. The team principal is from Tyrol, South Tyrol. The drivers are Danish and German. Like, they've never had, the closest they've had to an American driver was when they had Santino Ferrucci as their reserve driver. And Pietro Fittipaldi, he's Brazilian. He was born in Miami, but his family's Brazilian. He races a Brazilian license. It's not an American team, let's be honest. If Andretti can lean on that, go full on kind of America, fuck yeah, then yeah, that would be good. Yeah, I hope they do well because they've got experience. I mean, Mario, it's Michael, I think, running the team because Mario's quite old now, although he's still full of energy, even though he's in his 80s. So yeah, I want them in. I hope they do well. How many wins and podiums will Perez get in total this year? But that's a very specific number. I think he'll win 2 more races, let's say. I think Max is going to win most of them. There's going to be the odd one where maybe he's just faster, or something goes wrong for Max and Perez can do it. Yeah, a couple more, but not many. He'll win a couple later on. The thing, if anyone other than Red Bull are going to win races, it's going to be after Max has won the title, because then they'll ease off a bit probably, just like last year. What would happen if Mika Hakkinen actually returned to F1 after the sabbatical? He would come back and just not be as good. If, for example, let's say he came back in 2003, I'm guessing, because by that point Kimi was already there, they probably would have booted out David Coulthard. A year on the sidelines, I don't think it would have helped him. Kimi was still young and he was doing wonders. They maybe, with him, he wouldn't have won the title again, but 2003, he could have easily helped them win the Constructors' title. That could have happened. But like Schumacher and Mansell and anyone else who's then come back, they just wouldn't have been as good, because a year when you're already fairly old and then having time away from it, it just it doesn't help you. That's the thing. If, for example, if Lewis retired at the end of this year and then he came back 3 years later, it would just be very underwhelming. That's just how it is. And the same with, that's why I don't really want Vettel to come back as a driver. Right, next question. Ipsilon2643 asks, we see a lot of new races in the Middle East. It is a bit like the money spending in football by Saudi Arabia. Could we see any more races or even teams from those countries, and could it change the sport in the long term? Or could it just be a phase of spending a lot of money till it gets boring for them? I hope not. I can't see any Middle Eastern teams anytime soon, or drivers. I mean, the only Middle Eastern drivers I can actually name off the top of my head are the 2 Al-Kubaisi sisters in Formula Academy. They're going to put as many races as they can from the Middle East in because money. But we don't need any of them. This is the thing. Yeah, some people don't like it when I say this, but if I could control the calendar, I would scrap all of the Middle Eastern races. Like, you could use Bahrain for winter testing, but we're dropping Jeddah, we're dropping Bahrain, we're dropping Abu Dhabi, because there are a lot of other circuits that we don't have that we should. And I think as well, when it comes to hosting races, it needs to be a country that needs to have the infrastructure to host a race, which they do, to be fair, and the money, but there needs to be a strong motorsport heritage from that country. There needs to be a lot of demand from the general public and a lot of interest. And also it needs to be a country that isn't committing major human rights abuses. And on that basis, none of them qualify. And the same with places like China. So that's my reason for getting rid of them. Also, America does not need 3 races. Sorry. You can have 1 and it will be at COTA. We don't need to go to Vegas, and we definitely don't need to keep going back to Miami. We need to bring back Hockenheim. When the South African government has got on top of the power cuts, we can go back to Kyalami as well. A case can be made to try bringing India back, because that circuit is amazing. I'm intrigued. Maybe this is just nostalgia talking, but I wouldn't mind. Okay, Sepang needs to come back. Absolutely. I wouldn't mind trying Korea again, because I love that circuit. And we need to do the Nürburgring GP track needs to be involved in some way. Yeah, basically. What drivers do you think will be at Audi in 2026? Well, they've already said they've got Neil Yarni's their simulator driver. Well, in 4 years' time, it's hard to say. I mean, people keep saying that Bottas might go there. And it's like, well, if he's in 3 years, isn't it? Yeah. He could still be here in 3 years, I guess, Bottas. Maybe him. If they want someone experienced, that's probably a good set of hands. It could be anyone. That's the thing. In 3 years, we could be looking at drivers currently in Frecker doing it. So you could be like, I try to look as far back as I can in terms of the junior formulas to see who might get into Formula One soon. And Andrea Kimi Antonelli is the one everyone's talking about in Formula 3. And there's that Yugo Yuchukwu, that American kid as well. People talk about him a lot. Andrea Kimi Antonelli, he'll probably end up in Formula One. He's Italian Prema driver, Ferrari Academy, so maybe not Audi. But the others, it's hard to say. Like, in 3 years, Paul Aron, maybe Dino Beganovic, but they're Ferrari juniors. Would Red Bull reasonably sell AlphaTauri in the near future? I mean, they may as well. Like, as soon as it stopped being called Toro Rosso, they should have just got rid of it. Like, I still see AlphaTauri as Toro Rosso. I guess really I should see them as Minardi, but yeah. It doesn't have the same, like, it was quite a good setup they had of being the junior team, and, you know, they used to have the same car with a different engine. Yeah, they may as well just sell them because they are operating increasingly independently of one another now. And the system, it's difficult because the thing is, Red Bull, it has been a good system in the past of giving people opportunities and that, but they've got too many drivers in their academy and not enough seats, and Alpine have this issue as well. Yeah, if they wanted to get rid of AlphaTauri, and if someone wants to rename it Minardi, then hell yeah. Next question. Crunchy asks, opinion on Abu Dhabi 21. We are going there. Okay, let's go there. Abu Dhabi 2021. My opinion is the right driver won the championship. So Max had... championships are not won on individual races. They're won across entire seasons. Both drivers drove exceptionally well that year because they forced each other to push to their limits. Max did everything he needed and then some. Lewis had some of his best drives, but he also made a lot of mistakes. Most notably being Imola, Baku, and Hungary. He ended up not losing any points in Imola because of the red flag. Because the red flag came and he was unlapping himself, but he cost himself 25 points in Baku. He cost himself the win in Hungary. It's things like that. And obviously people are divided on what happened in terms of the collision, whose fault it was with their collision in Silverstone and again in Monza. But in terms of what was going on behind the scenes with race control, yeah, it was basically being done for drama and excitement, and people are saying it's turning into WWE because the thing is they were favoring. They started for most of the season they were favoring Lewis in terms of stewarding decisions because he was falling behind Max, and then in the last half a dozen races he has that new engine and he has comfortably the fastest car, and then Max starts getting in his head and he's the one making errors and driving erratically because he can't keep up. And then they start favouring Max in the decisions because they need that to keep it close. Because when after Jeddah and they were tied on points, I was thinking, has it really got to this point that they're actually tied on points? Because that's only happened once before. It was either 72 or 74. Emerson Fittipaldi and Ronnie Peterson, I think they were tied on points going into the final round. And I was thinking before Abu Dhabi, I was thinking I can see this going to the last lap like Brazil 2008. And it just ended up. I don't think Latifi crashed deliberately. It was just a hell of a coincidence. The thing is, it took them absolutely ages to deploy the safety car for what was such an obvious safety car. And this is something that keeps happening, is that you can see that's an obvious safety car and it takes them half a lap to deploy it. And I think by doing it late, that prevented Lewis from being able to pit and keep ahead because he would have caught the safety car by then. And the safety cars, they take too long. Let's be honest. We don't need this rule that once you have to wait X amount of laps before you let the back markers unlap themselves, and then you have to wait another whole lap before they carry on. It's like, no, as soon as the lead car reaches the safety car, then you can just let anyone that needs to unlap themselves can. And once it's been cleared, you just get the race going again as fast as possible. We don't need safety cars that go on for 10 laps. They need to be done. Just get them done quickly and let's get back to the racing. And yeah, it would have ended anticlimactically had they just ended behind the safety car, and obviously Hamilton wins the title. That would have been criticised a lot as well, because it's like, okay, you've won it under the... They've taken away any chance that Max had to challenge him. And I think also the controversies about just how the season turned on its head in the end, because without all of the things around collisions between the drivers and all these dodgy penalties, Max would have won the title probably in Qatar, because he was just, yeah, they both lost a lot of points in different ways, from a mixture of collisions with each other, their own errors, and that kind of thing, basically. But so my opinion is basically the right driver won the championship. But we just need to race controller a mess, and it needs and the stewards and everything, and it needs. I miss Charlie Whiting, basically. Why not just void safety car laps? They don't count during the race. You can't do that because then the cars run out of fuel. That's why they can't. That's why you don't do that, because otherwise we could have had a Formula E situation where Max lunges at him and they're going down the back straight, and then suddenly the cars just go and just grind to a halt, and it's whoever can shuffle their car forward or whatever gets the. Well, actually, Max would still win it because neither of them finished. Yeah. That's why they have to count the laps, is because the fuel runs out. Otherwise, yeah. So Abu Dhabi. Oh dear. Was Updude 94 and Destiny for Bricks ask, how did you come to be so knowledgeable about F1? Just being here for a long enough time, or is it also some personal investigation out of interest? A large amount of what I've learned has been since I started making videos. I mean, when it comes to stuff that's happened since 2008, most of that I can just remember offhand because I've been watching it. But before that, my memory is very fuzzy. And I do have to investigate these things and research it myself. But I have learned a lot of things that I didn't know from having to research it. It's just in my nature. It probably wouldn't surprise people to learn that I have Asperger's syndrome. And one of the characteristics of that is having narrow, intense interests. And so you home in on one very specific topic or subject and will learn a lot about it very rapidly. And I've done that with loads of different things in the past. I've gone through phases. Obviously, I've consistently had a passion for classical music. Astronomy has been another one. Motoring in general. Anything to do with engineering, I absolutely love. So I love stuff about ships, spacecraft, aviation history, trains as well. I love all of that. Architecture as well. I used to be big into that. Yeah, it's just a lot of, now I kind of have to, because I have to research all this stuff, and so I have learned a ton of stuff from just reading lots of different things and listening to different other people and that, basically. Kuba Yankoviak asks, where do you see Tsunoda in the coming years? Would Robert Kubica become a world champion if it wasn't for his accident? If you could change the career of one driver, who would it be? Tsunoda. Okay, so Tsunoda, he's improved considerably this year. I mean, we've seen he's driving the socks off what is obviously not a very good car, and he's just being beaten down at every step. If you were to compare him to other Japanese drivers, he's better than most of them. I don't think he's on the level of Sato or Kobayashi. He's not nearly as exciting to watch as them in terms of his racecraft. But he's perfectly good. His speed is getting better. I think it's unlikely that he would get promoted to Red Bull. But yeah, he seems... AlphaTauri, his services could definitely go somewhere else. I'm not sure where, other than Haas, maybe, or Alfa Romeo, maybe one of those. But yeah, he'll be around for a bit. Maybe he'll get like a podium here or there. Yuki Tsunoda. Would Robert Kubica become a world champion if it wasn't for his accident? This is one I want to cover because once I get my Photoshop skills up to scratch, I will do a whole series of alternate history videos that I've got planned. I just need to get good at photoshopping drivers' heads onto other overalls and that. So Kubica, he was going to go to Ferrari in, I think, 2012 or 2013. That was planned already. So that more than likely would have been in place of Massa, but then you have two top end drivers. He would have been alongside Alonso. Obviously, 2012 actually, because obviously thing nearly won the title. Alonso, Kubica versus Alonso. I don't think he could beat Alonso, to be honest. He'd be very close. And then 2013, no chance. 2014, if he stuck around, I don't know. It's so hard to say where he would have gone, and if he would have stayed long term at Ferrari, because if Alonso leaves again in 2014, but then Vettel comes in, and then you get Kubica Vettel, he would need a team where he could become the dominant voice, and that could have happened at BMW Sauber if they hadn't flopped and then pulled out. And it was turning that way in 2008. He would have needed a seat at Mercedes, basically. And if it wasn't going to go to Hamilton, it would have gone to Hülkenberg. And so we could have seen even Nico Hülkenberg as a champion. So I'm going to say no, because there were too many other championship contending drivers around. If you could change the career of one driver, who would it be? Well, there are several drivers that died, where obviously if you could take that away, that would, well, all of them, to be honest. But the ones that people would love to see, Jules Bianchi, because he could have gone to, this is one, I did actually write a script for an alternate history about Bianchi. And the TLDR with that is that he goes to Sauber, and then I think he goes to Haas, and then he goes to Ferrari, and he's still there with Leclerc as his teammate and his protege. That's my alternate history for Bianchi. And yeah, that would have been good, because then to see someone rise up from one of the three new teams and actually do well. Although you're saying that obviously Ricciardo did, and yeah. Senna, obviously, I think had Senna not died, I think he could have won the title in 94. It would have been like a Hamilton Verstappen type situation. And if you think how close Damon Hill got, and factoring in also Schumacher's disqualifications and exclusions for different things, yeah, I think if he doesn't die, Senna wins the 94 title. Maybe not 95. I think he probably wants to stick with Williams because they're still good. And then I think at the end of a lot of people think at the end of 97 he would have retired, because by that point he would have been 37 years old, been racing in F1 for 13 years, and they were going to introduce the grooved tyres and the narrower cars, and that was enough to turn off people like Gerhard Berger. Yeah, I think that would have happened with him. And yeah, you could say that was so many other drivers. Jim Clark would have won. Jim Clark would have won the 1968 championship without his death. Maybe not any others after that, because Lotus flopped. Well, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. Those are the main ones where you think what could have happened if they hadn't died. I think that's the main thing. Do you have tips how to regain love to F1 when your favorite driver doesn't drive anymore? Well, my favorite driver doesn't drive anymore because Vettel's gone. It does feel different. I don't really notice it so much. I mean, every so often I think he should be in the Aston Martin seat instead of Stroll. For me, obviously I still love it, and it concerns me a little because on Twitter there are so many negative opinions that it's not nearly as interesting, and I think because we were basically spoiled in 2021 and it's failed to live up to that. And that happened 10 years ago. We were spoiled in 2010 and 2012, and then 2013 didn't live up to that. I think going back and watching classic races kind of reinvigorates things, definitely. That's kind of the best way to keep the interest going and remind yourself of how good it has been in the past, even if it's not as good now as before. And if you can afford it, going to races as well would help. I'm on. Oh, there's only a few questions left. I skipped over a few. So yeah, on the last page of questions we got, Nicholas Jones, which engine manufacturer would you prefer to see back on the grid and why? BMW. I mentioned BMW coming back as a manufacturer, but they should come back as an engine supplier because we need more of them. And their engines were always monsters. I mean, the Williams engines were so good. So yeah, I want BMW back as an engine supplier and as a full-on manufacturer. I enjoyed it 10 years ago when we had like Toyota and Jag and Honda and all of those involved. Yeah, we need more manufacturers in F1. If one had to stay and two had to go out of Suzuka 2005, Germany 2019, or Brazil 2012, which would stay? Championship results notwithstanding, just pure undiluted racing. Otherwise, Brazil 2012 would be the easy win, so Seb wins number 3. I'm going to keep Brazil 2012 because I said before it's my favourite race, I think. Suzuka 2005, I didn't watch that live because I wasn't watching F1 at the time, and obviously that one has the famous moves by Fisichella and Alonso. This got pointed out to me actually when I did the video covering if every championship had the original point system, that in that case Raikkonen's move on Fisichella would have been the move that would have won him the championship at the following round. He would have won it by 1 point or 2 points. We should have made that all the better. Germany 2019, that was splendid. The thing is, I loved that race because, again, it was the first properly wet race we'd had in such a long time, and they actually let them race. That was the good thing. They weren't like, oh, let's run for 20 laps behind the bloody safety car. It was like, no, you're going to do a standing start, and we're just going to go and see what happens. There were probably safety cars in that race. I can't remember to be honest. But yeah, we haven't had. We need that again. We need more wet races, and more wet races where it rains properly and they just let them race. I understand safety concerns because it's ever since Bianchi that they've been more concerned about driving in the wet. But these are the best drivers in the world. They can handle a bit of rain, and sometimes they need to be challenged because we don't need them getting 3 hours of practicing and testing time before each race, knowing exactly how to set the car, what the tyres are going to do, when to pit. We need something to make them be a bit more spontaneous. It's way too clinical otherwise. Hey, it's Oywin asks, do the Adrian Sutil and Lewis Hamilton being gay rumours have any truth? So this is in the first iceberg. I'll explain a bit if anyone doesn't know. Basically, there have been rumours for a long time that Hamilton and Sutil are or have been or were in a homosexual relationship. It comes from the fact that basically they were very close friends from when they raced in Formula 3 Euro Series until and going into F1. They had a very, very close friendship. 2011 was when Sutil got in a bar brawl with the CEO of Lotus and stabbed him in the neck with a champagne glass. He then went on trial in 2012 and lost his seat at Force India. Hamilton did not testify as a witness. And then Sutil labelled him a coward and they fell out. And some people think the reason is because apparently the guy that he attacked was throwing homophobic abuse at him, and it would have forced Hamilton to basically out both of them. And yeah, I don't think I don't think it's true, because they both had. Well, at the time this was happening, Hamilton was dating Nicole Scherzinger, and Sutil he's been with his current girlfriend for a long time. So I don't think they were both having affairs, really. And some people have also said the reason that they would have had to keep it secret is to not jeopardize the races in the Middle East. I mean, that sounds a bit more plausible, but I feel like with Hamilton, he's not the kind of person that would keep that silent. I think if he wanted to speak out against the way gay people are treated in the Middle East or any other countries, he would obviously refer to himself if he swung that way, and use that for his message. But yeah, so I think it's highly unlikely, but you know, we don't really know much. We know little to nothing of what goes on in these drivers' lives beyond what we see at race weekends and what they choose to post on social media. So yeah, I don't know. I think I probably not. Maximus asks, regarding the iceberg videos, how much time did you spend researching the different levels? Given the number of subjects to be covered, especially in Volume 2, I was wondering how much time you took to research them all. The first video did not take that long to make because that one's just over an hour long, and also the tier was made for me because I just stole one off of Reddit. So that there were a few subjects I didn't really understand, and there are ones which I probably should have covered entirely differently because I didn't understand what it meant when it said things like Kvyat is the goat and science not existing, and that I didn't. Obviously, people explained to me what that was talking about, which I didn't get at the time. The second one took a bit longer. The difficulty with that was I asked for suggestions to what to put on, and I received a lot of them, and I had to then narrow those down and pick out the good ones and put those in, and then decide what tier to put them in. And I limited it to 5 per tier because otherwise it would be too long, and that video is well over 2 hours long because I couldn't help but just go into immense amount of details on each of them. Each tier individually, I guess 3 to 4 days. It took just over a month to make the video, and there's 8 tiers. So yeah, I mean, some of the subjects are ones I knew a ton of, like things like Spygate and whatnot. I mean, everyone knows everything about that, but there were a couple of more obscure ones, like Rene Prévost, the guy that built that ground effect car in the 1920s. I couldn't even find any photographs of him, or any real census data. So it was hard to say. I wasn't even sure if the guy was real. I had only a couple of very sparse sources, and some photographs of the wind tunnel model and that. But that was a very interesting one, the Rene Prévost story. People say that Verstappen has the most raw talent in F1, but in my case, Kimi had more raw talent than when he came, to my opinion. What do you think? Yeah, I think only DTS fans would say that Verstappen has that, or Hamilton, because if you haven't been watching for very long, then that's all you've seen. It's a recency bias thing. Obviously, Max is immensely talented, and he has matured enormously. 2018 was a real paradigm-shifting season for him because it started so badly and ended so strongly. But he's still, we've seen he's still hot-headed. He still fights hard, but that's what people love about him. That's what I think. That's what I've always liked about him, was he's always been so exciting to watch, because he didn't care about. He was going to defend against you no matter what, and maybe he was being a bit dodgy with things like, weaving in the braking zones, blah, blah, blah. But, we just needed someone a bit more exciting, and that's what he's given us. And because he was so young as well, and it devoted his entire life to racing, and now he is a bit more polished. I mean, this year, he's not so impressive this year because he's just leading from the front. And every champion has that phase where Hamilton and Vettel both had this too, and Schumacher obviously, where they're just getting bored because the races are too easy. But he has also proved, to be honest, that he can win from almost any position on the grid. If you think he's won races from 10th and 15th or whatever. Even Hamilton, Hamilton's won a race from 14th. Vettel never won a race outside the top 3. Schumacher had a couple from outside the top 10, but yeah, he's very adaptable, hardly ever makes any mistakes. He's just a very well-rounded driver. Much love from New Zealand. Love your content. Wow, it's what 5 a.m. in New Zealand. That's a late one on a Monday morning as well. Is it Sunday? It is Sunday today, isn't it? Yeah. I try not to stay up too late making videos. I mean, I'm rarely in bed before midnight, but I don't want to be one of these people that does like a massive grind and is up till like 3 a.m. finishing videos off. I tend to procrastinate a lot. I get very lazy sometimes. I'll do a little bit here and there and then do something else for like an hour and then come back and write like another paragraph of a script. Yeah. Seiji Wesson asks, if you were a team CEO and could assemble an all-time team with drivers and team principals, who would it be? Okay, all-time, so anyone dead or alive. My team principal would be Colin Chapman. obviously just a brilliant mind and an old school team principal that was also an engineer slash technical director. Yeah, we need someone who's as forward thinking and innovative as that. Um, my technical director, if you don't count Colin Chapman, it would be Adrian Newey for obvious reasons. That's an unbeatable combination alone. Just Colin Chapman and Adrian Newey together. Drivers. Schumacher would be the lead driver because you need someone. He was so congenial. He built Ferrari essentially from the ground up, and they ran a very well-oiled machine, and he knew who he wanted in terms of drive teammates and everyone around him. Yeah, and just drove exceptionally well. Was testing all the time. Second driver. A good number 2. You don't want someone that's going to be getting in the way. I mean, Barrichello was good at that, but I think we can go better than Barrichello. Perez is not the best number 2. Bottas was at least dependable, I suppose. Mark Webber. Yeah, I'm not having Mark Webber. I don't need my number 2 driver going into anti-stall at the start of every single race, and then moaning and wondering why he can't win championships. Yeah, Bottas is a good shout. If you go into it under the assumption he's not going to be challenging the number 1 and don't get your expectations up, then yeah, that would be fun. Coulthard, yeah, Coulthard was good. He was a number 2. He was a good number 2. Yeah, Coulthard is actually a good shout because he did flop a bit, but he wasn't like he could still win races when the others couldn't most of the time. Yeah, either Coulthard or Bottas would be a good number 2. And as a test driver, I would probably have someone like Pedro De La Rosa, assuming we can have unlimited testing. Someone dependable that you know can just get the mileage out and give you the data you want. Do you think Giovinazzi binning the Haas in Cota FP1 cost him Schumacher's seat for this year? I don't even remember that. Last year, maybe it did. The Schumacher thing is it's sad. I understand the pressures of being who he is. His F2 season at the time, because he had the most insane race starts in F2 in 2020, and a lot of people are saying he had an illegal engine, and it's like, well, actually, maybe that was true. I don't know. Because the engines do seem to vary a lot, and the cars you're given in terms of how worn out the parts are and everything else. And he beat Mazepin, but it's Mazepin, and the car was awful, so you can't say much about 2021. But last year, I mean, I think, yeah, Günther Steiner could have been a little bit nicer to him. And he had a few races that were really good, like Austria and Silverstone, but most of them were just not there, unfortunately. If he had the same kind of talent as his father, it would have shone through and we would have seen it. But that's quite common to see the sons of drivers end up not being as good. It doesn't seem, in most cases, it doesn't seem to be inherited in the same way. But at Mercedes, I mean, that he's doing as much as he can within the confines of the lack of testing and opportunities at Mercedes. But yeah, Giovinazzi binning it, maybe it did, because Giovinazzi is fine. I mean, there was Spa 2019 was the one where he crashed on the last lap, and that did not help him. And otherwise, he was all right. He was, by and large, beating Raikkonen in Alfa Romeo. Obviously, Raikkonen was quite old by then, near the end of his career. But maybe that did. But Hülkenberg is the better prospect than Giovinazzi. Should F1 be a spec series? No, never. It stops being Formula One if it becomes a spec series. Who on the current grid will become a world champion in the future? I think Leclerc has to. If not with Ferrari, he'll be with a team where it happens because he's just going to push for it. I used to think for a few races I was thinking maybe Checo, but that's obviously not happening anymore. George is possible if Mercedes get back to where they used to be. and Hamilton retires. But in terms of lower levels, like the rookies, Piastri has potential. I can't, there aren't any, I don't see any like surprise champions in the way that before 2016 I never would have suspected Nico Rosberg being a champion when he was just a midfield driver at Williams and that. Yeah, let's say George and Leclerc. Do you think Webber should have won the 2010 championship? He could have won it, but just didn't. If he hadn't crashed at Korea, that did not help him enormously. No, Vettel won it, and Vettel should have won it because he had so many setbacks. I mean, he did have his own errors. I mean, you know, Turkey, Belgium, but he lost an avalanche of points from reliability problems, and that stopped him leading the championship at any point except after the last race. So no, it always should have been Vettel in 2010 in my eyes, and you know I am a Vettel fanboy. But yeah. Thoughts on Latifi and Deleda? Well, neither of them are prep for F1, but especially not Deleda. He is. I mean, you can tell how insecure he is because Josh Revel's first video about him got taken down because Alessio's lawyers threatened him, and then he eventually made a second one, which he's ignored. But yeah, just horrifically bad. I misread it when I found that he was joining F2. I thought he just retained his seat in F3, and I was like, is this a joke? And he just, was so far off the pace. And he's someone, he started motorbikes when he was, 17? And then he was getting lapped and just not, there was like the gap between him and 19th was as big as the gap between 19th and 1st. He was just one of the ones completely unprepared. Latifi, again, not really F1 spec. We saw that he was his first 2 years he wasn't bad because obviously George was always beating him in qualifying, but in the races he was actually okay because he could keep himself out of trouble. But then he obviously did not adjust well to the ground effect cars because he was just crashing so much and got so much slower. Is Deleda worse than Raghunathan? No. Mahavir Raghunathan is worse because Deleda, even though he was slow, he did actually understand the rules. Like, he wasn't unlapping himself, not that he could. He wasn't, like, ignoring blue flags or carrying on at race speed after the checkered flag has gone and all of that. No, he wasn't that bad. No. Will a season ranking per decade be something of a video idea starting the 2010s? Yeah, that'd be easy. I mean, there's only 10 of them a year. I think if I wonder, that would probably be one I could let you lot do because there's only 10 to rank. I think, the small scale like ranking videos are ones I can, in the interests of engagement and that, I can say, fill out this form and you can rank these. So I think recently I did the Finnish F1 drivers and there's only 9 of them. I am going to do, again, the views haven't been that good, which is a bit annoying, but I like making those videos because it's quite fun. I got well over 200 people voted in that poll, so that was really good turnout. I am going to do a video where I'm going to let you lot rank every Japanese Formula 1 driver. And there's about 25 of them. And there's also, I'm going to do one where you can rank every Brazilian F1 driver as well, because there's a lot of good drivers in there and it's a relatively small. Beyond that it gets difficult because, like, if I was ever going to rank every British driver, I would do that myself because there's well over 100 of them, and I wouldn't be like, okay, here's a Google Forms and here's 100 drivers, rank them all, and most of them are ones most people probably haven't heard of as well. There'll be more of those. There's plenty of video ideas going around. What would you think of equal engines? No. We need more engine diversity. More manufacturers coming in. Yeah, I don't want them having the same engines. That's like an inverse of IndyCar. Same engine, different chassis. Will Laszlo Tote win the 24 driver championship? What is he doing now? Because he's not in F3 anymore. I mean, he was useless in F3. I haven't kept. I'm guessing, knowing him, he's probably doing something like Ferrari Challenge Europe or that BMW series that Callum Williams went into, or I don't know. Or is he? No. Wait, Lazato. Is he in WEC? But whatever. Yeah, another one whose destiny was not Formula One. Would Rosberg have been able to win a championship with either Vettel or Alonso in the other Merc? If it was Vettel, yes, I think so. 2016, if we take 2016 as the marker because he beat Hamilton, then yes, I think Vettel. Hamilton, obviously, there was the engine failure, but then he also had things like crashing in qualifying in Azerbaijan and, all those botched race starts. Vettel would have made errors of his own, probably. If Alonso went to Mercedes in 2014, he would have won every race he finished. Yeah, I think Alonso would have won. Alonso would have, like, if the stars aligned, Alonso could have, like, 10 championships by now. Any F drivers in F2, F3 you think have a good chance F1? Well, I said this before. The two main ones, Pourchaire and Behrman, are the ones from F2, I think. And I guess F3, my first guess would be Paul Aaron and Pepe Marti. Only a few more questions left. Crystal Racing asks, between Alonso and Kimi, who was the better driver between 2003 and 2007? Kimi. Just looking at 2005, his own driving was near flawless, but he had 3 mechanical retirements from the lead, and then he had engine penalties in Spa and Monza, and then he was set to win Monza, and then he got a puncture. Whereas Alonso obviously he was driving exceptionally well, but he had a couple of races where he didn't do so well or crashed or whatever. And then before that, well, neither of them were in the best. 2004, they both. Well, Kimi won a race. I don't think Alonso did in 2004. And 2003, again, Kimi had the better car, but he was being so consistent to finish. He finished second, 7 times? Only won 1 race. Nearly won the title with only a single win. I think Kimi was the better one overall. This was a time when he was having all the setbacks, and then it was 2007 onwards when Alonso was the one having all the setbacks, but most importantly, making a lot of very poorly thought out career decisions about where he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time almost all the time from then on. Has De Vries's awful season in F1 this year all but killed the idea of Formula E to Formula 1 driver moves? Not necessarily. Maybe just for him. I mean, Formula E is difficult because of the lack of consistency. It's difficult to kind of measure people. And again, you can say with him because he won F2, but he won F2 in a not particularly competitive field because you had, it was like Latifi was the runner-up and that. It wasn't as stacked as it could be. And F3, there's a lot of... F3 is made up primarily of drivers who are ex-Formula 1 or have tried and failed to get into F1, but the driving standards can sometimes be really, really appallingly low. If there's anyone else that looks good, I mean, I could see Stoffel Van Dorn coming back, but he's a known quantity because he has raced in Formula 1 already. And he was teammates to Alonso, which didn't help, but he was still okay. I mean, I could see Stoffel Van Dorn being given another chance with someone. He's had connections to McLaren, Mercedes, and Aston Martin all the time. Yeah, if they think they're really good enough, then why not? But the two are operating kind of independently of one another. I'm sure you've answered this in the QA already, but any tracks that have never been used in the F1 calendar and you want to see on the calendar, that haven't been. Well, I mentioned it before, but Le Mans needs to be tried. Bugatti circuit, which is the mini motorbike circuit, that was used in the French Grand Prix once in the 1950s, but the full Le Mans circuit has never been used in Formula One. Most of the circuits I know are F1. Like there aren't many F1 circuits that are FIA, or there aren't many circuits that are FIA Grade 1 that I can think of. I know it's not Grade 1, but I absolutely would love to see F1 race at Bathurst in Australia. It's a Grade 3 circuit, but it is so good. Like, you've got those two massive long straights, which are really bumpy, it's really narrow, and then you've got that, like, hill climb section and all these huge elevation changes. Like, just inject it into my veins. We need F1 to drive at Bathurst. Like, yeah, it just needs to happen. Another thing I would do with my calendar, Monaco would become a night race. And anyone who's ever played Need for Speed Porsche 2000 or Need for Speed Porsche Unleashed, as you'll know, in America, will understand why. But yeah, Monaco is a night race. That would completely reinvigorate it, I think. Yeah, Bathurst is the one I really, really want to see F1 cars drive at. Because most of the other really good circuits, Road America's got a massive hill on it, hasn't it? So that could be cool. Road America. Yeah, it's hard to think of many other circuits that are like big ones. To be honest, that would be suitable for Formula One. What do you think of Manicourt? I don't mind Manicourt, to be honest. I mean, it is flat. My main thing is I didn't watch F1 when they were... Well, I watched 2008, that race. In Formula One Championship Edition, the AI are so slow at Manicourt. So I loved racing there because they would lose like a second on you in just the middle sector. And I could lap the entire field in full-length races on F1 Championship Edition. But it's all right. A case could be made to go back to Manicourt because Paul Ricard is just not landing. Especially not this kind of emasculated Paul Ricard that has that annoying chicane in the middle of the Mistral Straight and all of that. How would you rank Alonso's career moves from best to worst? And do you think he would have won the 2008 if he had stayed at McLaren? Well, his best career move... Well, obviously, Minardi to Renault, because he won his titles of Renault. His worst career move is obviously going to be Ferrari to McLaren. That goes without saying, 2015. Would he have won the title in 2008? It would have been so ugly between him and Hamilton. Actually, no, he wouldn't, because they would have taken points off each other, and Massa would have won the title. If you think he only lost it by 1 point. So yeah, no, he doesn't win it. I should do an alternate history, and if he stayed, because I wonder how that would have affected Lewis if Lewis would have eventually got pushed out. But then Lewis had been with McLaren since he was like 13 years old. Who's your favorite backmarker team? HRT. That goes without saying. It's HRT. Yeah. Also, yeah, I've seen, obviously, I haven't acknowledged them. Lots of people complimenting me just, yeah. Thank you all for your positive comments about the channel and everything. That's how that was what drove me in the early days when I had like 500 subs to keep pushing videos out. Was even if they didn't get many views, everyone loved, everyone always gave me really positive comments. So that's how I knew I was onto something good with my style and everything. Rouen Les Sarthes would be amazing. Well, they have raced there. Again, this was in the 50s or 60s. That was an F1 circuit. For modern ones, it would just be very, very fast. This is the thing. When you look at the circuits from the 1950s, and recently I did, because those of you who see me on Twitter, I did that thread where I was, where I just showed every single Formula One circuit in history, how they look on Google Earth, including the ones that aren't used anymore. Rouen, yeah, a lot of the 50s circuits were very basic. It was a lot of long straights and fast corners. There weren't all these twiddly bits. They weren't a lot of these hairpins or anything. They were very, very fast, and that's probably one reason why it was so dangerous, is because the average speeds were not much slower than they are with modern cars. Monaco was comparatively safe because it was quite a slow circuit, even when you factor in the fact that they didn't cover up the pavements. and there was nothing protecting you from going into the harbour except for a couple of bollards and hay bales and whatnot. Have you thought about doing a video about unraced F1 cars such as the Honda RA109 and the Toyota TF110? I probably should. I've covered unraced cars in the sense of like the Life L190, because that was a car that it entered Grand Prix but never qualified for this. It didn't race. But yeah, I know what you mean in terms of ones that were never even entered into a championship or got built and then just abandoned. Yeah, I probably should. It's probably been done before, but I could put my own spin. I could do just, 5 F1 cars that never raced or something. And I could cover the 2010 Toyota, the Honda, one of the Minardis. I think there was the Manor from 2017 Manor. There's probably going to be ones from way back in the past as well that I can find. So yeah, that's a video idea. Right, only a couple of questions left on this document. Connor H asks, what are your thoughts on the channel doing race reviews? I know this channel is based around history and highlighting lesser known teams and drivers, and part of me doesn't want that to change, but I also find myself after each race thinking, I wonder what Peter has to say. I'm not going to do race reviews because everyone else is doing that. There are lots of other channels such as Tomo and the F1 Word and many others that cover race previews and current events and do podcasts and stuff, and that's just not my jam. Like they can do that, and they do it much better than I would. But I'm not personally interested in reviewing races or doing predictive type videos like will George Russell be a champion or will Teo Porcher make it into F1. Like I prefer to look at, well, I say that having done alternate history, I prefer to look at objective fact and just the things that have happened and cover subjects which aren't really being covered, because everyone has their own niche, and obviously this is mine. So for the time being, obviously I'm always happy to make podcast appearances and stuff, and I've sometimes considered doing my own podcast, which would essentially just be an audio version of my current videos, which is kind of what my Patreon does. So yeah, if you haven't subscribed to my Patreon, do subscribe to that, because there you can get early access. I upload just the audio from each video like a day or two or a couple of days before the video itself comes out, and so you can get that early if you want to listen in on what the next video is. And I put a couple of other small things up there too. How old are you? I'm 30 years old. Yeah, still stuck at home, but that's thanks in no part to the bloody pandemic. What do you think of Vitaly Petrov? Well, everyone remembers him for being a big shitster with 2010. Obviously, a very good defender, would you believe? Vitaly 2010. 2011, he was quite spirited. He got a couple of podiums. That wasn't bad. 2012, he gave much better competition to Kovalainen than Trulli. I mean, Kovalainen drove exceptionally well when he was at Caterham, but it just kind of got overlooked because the car was not good enough to score points or anything. He was fine, but yeah, he was there as a pay driver. He joined them at the last minute because Trulli pulled out during winter testing and retired. And then he got in trouble a couple of years ago. I can't remember what it was he said specifically. It was when he was a race steward. He either spoke out against BLM and the pre-race ceremony taking the knee, or he said something about gay people that Hamilton didn't like. Or in support of Putin, something like that. But yeah, as a driver, he was all right. Yeah, but yeah, just kind of I think Petrov. Could you do a video on Eurobrune and driver bios on Roberto Moreno and Claudio Longes? I've had Roberto Moreno listed for ages. I haven't done a driver biography in forever. I haven't done one since Narain Karthikeyan, so he's one I've gotten down for a while. I need to do one on him. I was gonna do Alexander Wirtz probably. Takuma Sato, I should do him too. Claudio Longes, yeah, it'd be difficult to find a lot of concrete information. The problem I have with some of those drivers, it's because even though most people listen to my videos rather than watch them, I still like to find lots of pictures and videos, and I think with Claudio Longes that would be difficult. because he's a fairly obscure driver. One that I knew virtually nothing about until I had to research it for the 90s ranking video. And Eurobruin. Yeah, Eurobruin team history. I'll do, more of those. When it comes to the, like, high detail team history, the first priority is to do the Haas video for 2019. So I think I will get started on that when I've finished the video that's currently in development. Oh, last question on my document, and this was submitted just before the live stream. Random R Fella asked, the best race of the 2020 so far and the worst. The best race. That's actually really difficult. My mind goes blank. I'm really bad at remembering things that happened like a year ago. I can remember things 10 years ago easily. Monza 2020 was good. That was a good race. There must be one 2021. Imola was quite good that year. Sakia 2020, that I could not relax that whole race. I wanted nothing to happen so that George could win, and then everything happened. Maybe Sakia, I think that was a very good one. Austria was the first race of 2020. That was a scorcher too. The worst race, I mean, these are the ones you forget because nothing happens. There's probably going to be ones from like, oh, Britain 20. Oh, no, you're right. Silverstone 20 last year was just immense. Some of the best racing I've seen. That was, No, Silverstone 22, that's a perfect 10, I think, for races. Spa 21, nothing happened. Spa 21, Sakia, Checo, yeah. What are the others? Russia 21. That only kind of got good when the rain came down. That mixed things around. Hungary 2021 was obviously crazy. Once the race got going, it wasn't... I suppose, actually, there was some very good defending by Alonso against Hamilton, and you didn't know if Vettel might pass Ocon. Oh, God, can you imagine if Vettel had won that race and then got disqualified? Brazil 22... Yeah, that was perfectly good. I'm struggling to remember a lot of it now. Brazil last year. Brazil 2019, yeah, this is from 2020 onwards, but yeah, Brazil 2019 was a classic. Worst race. Well, these are the ones you forget. Okay, 2020, there were a bunch of races where Hamilton just cruised to victory and nothing happened. I'm going to say Spain 2020. There are a bunch of ones you could say just sucked. Or maybe Monaco 2021, I don't know. So yeah, ones like that. I have an idea for your alternate history video. Schumacher stays at Benetton for 1996 and joins McLaren in 1997. Turkey 2020, yes, that was brilliant too. Actually, Turkey. Oh, that was an amazing race, 2020 Turkey. Schumacher stays at Benetton 1996 and joins McLaren in 97. So, because he and Herbert both left, and it was Berger and Alesi that went in 96. So he would have stayed. If they get rid of Johnny Herbert, let's say they bring in Alesi, because maybe Berger doesn't want to be a number 2 again. And then he goes to McLaren in place of... I guess in place of Hakkinen, because at that time, I think Coulthard was still the... No, he wasn't the senior driver. Schumacher and Hakkinen, that's a hell of a lineup. 97. That would have given us a really good inter-team battle, because McLaren had the better car for both of those 2 years, and so Schumacher would have been matching it a bit more. Yeah, it would have been akin to Prost Senna. I don't know. It's one of the best. I've watched hardly any races from 98 and 99, but I look back on that era really, really fondly. The cars looked good. The racing was good. They were such good drivers. It's good for nostalgia. Late 90s is a period I really look back fondly on in Formula One. Is it true that Mercedes started testing the car with less downforce in Abu Dhabi 2020, preparing for 2021, and that's why Verstappen won that race so easily over the Mercedes? I didn't know that. That sounds plausible, maybe. I mean, because obviously by this point they knew that they were using the same cars again, just with small modifications. So maybe they did think we can start prepping for that. I don't know if they would have thought we need to be thinking that far in advance to the season finale. But maybe. I mean, they were. People got really excited. They were convinced that Red Bull suddenly had the fastest car at the Abu Dhabi 2020. It's like, no, they didn't. They'd already wrapped up both titles. Hamilton was clearly not over COVID, and he had rushed back after how well George had driven. And I think it was just that they didn't need to win. Basically, I mean, because the only other race where they hadn't won was the 70th anniversary race, and that was only because one of the few weaknesses that Mercedes has had is that they're not particularly good in high temperatures, and it's not going to be any better when you paint the entire car black as well. That's definitely not going to help with cooling. But otherwise, yeah, they were fastest everywhere else. They probably could have won that if they really wanted to, and if Hamilton was running at 100%, he probably could have. Is McLaren better than Ferrari? It depends in what context, but statistically, Ferrari is the most successful team ever. Ferrari has more of a legacy because they've been around longer. I mean, for me, the big three teams in F1 are McLaren, Ferrari, and Williams, because even though Red Bull and Mercedes might be pound for pound more successful, they're both quite new. I mean, okay, Mercedes raced in the 50s, but only for a year or two. But they haven't been around nearly as long. The others have been around for a lot longer. Reno49. Ooh, is that my first super chat? £20. Thank you so much. That's really generous. What have you said? You've said, with Honda rejoining and Ford partnering with Red Bull, 2026 is set to be a 2000s manufacturer reboot. The original rising costs eventually pushed out Jordan and Arrows, etc. Do you think 2026 will do the same to Haas or Williams? I don't care if Haas goes, but I really, really don't want Williams to go. It's not quite the same. Having lost Frank and Claire selling the team, it's not the same team really anymore because Patrick Head's not involved. But that's going to happen with any team. In the same way that McLaren, like Bruce McLaren, is long dead, so is Teddy Meyer as well. Not Martin Wishmart. What's the other one? The one that isn't Martin Whitmarsh hasn't been involved with them for years. And that, no, Williams need to stay. I don't want any. I don't want the name being changed. I think they need to. To me, they kind of feel like a Mercedes B team. Ron Dennis, yeah, that's who I meant to say. Ron Dennis, yeah, that's the one. They feel like a Mercedes B team because they've got Mercedes engines, and George went from them to Mercedes, and James Vowles came to them from Mercedes, and Williams in the hybrid era is basically just Mercedes but shit. I think that's the best way to describe them, because their Mercedes engines have carried them for what have been some bloody awful chassis. And so power dependent circuits is where they've shown up and done well. I mean, the team is a mess, but think about how good they were in the 80s and 90s. They've always been at the forefront of innovation and engineering development, and they're a classic team, and they need to stay, I think. Yeah, those are the three teams that can't leave. Yeah, Ferrari, in the same way, again, my prospective calendar, as well as making Monaco a night race, I would give heritage status to Monza, Silverstone, Spa, and Monaco, because they're the only circuits that have been on the calendar since 1950, which basically would give them a permanent spot on the calendar. Like, those are the ones that's non-negotiable. They can't go, no matter how many like Middle Eastern Tilkodromes they want to throw at us. But yeah, Reno, thank you so much for the £20 and the super chat. Growing up in the 90s, I still have a massive soft spot for Williams, even if they're the same They're the same team in name only. Yeah, I do. I wasn't watching F1 in the 90s, but I still love them. When I was watching loosely like 20 years ago, I loved I thought they were just BMWs because it had the BMW logo on the front and the engines, but I loved them because I was like, oh, it's BMW and Ferrari and Jaguar and all of that racing in F1. I thought it was really cool. Where do you get your F1 footage without copyright? Strictly speaking, I don't. I basically claim I do what the majority of other YouTubers do, which is basically claim fair use. So fortunately, I haven't had any issues with that. I've had a couple of videos that have got copyright striked, and then you have to cut bits out. It's usually if you're using F1 footage, so FOM race footage that was broadcast, if you're using that for more than about 10 or 20 seconds at a time, that's when the bots are likely to recognize that. But you can use like 5 seconds at a time is fine. When it comes to amateur footage, because I use a lot of that, so people filming on their phones in the grandstands, because often people will film things that the broadcasters did not pick up on, or it's especially good for seeing the back markers. Because whenever I do the research videos, like the high detail race review videos that I've done for HRT and that, at the race start, you're sat there squinting at the screen, trying to see what's going on at the back, and then they go out of shot immediately and trying to see what's going on, who's overtaking who where. But then with amateur footage, you can see all of that. With them, I will give credit to whoever it is, and a few people have said, oh, thanks for using my videos, and they said they don't mind it. I have concerns that I may run into some problems in the future, but they haven't happened yet. But in most cases, you can claim fair use if you're using it in small amounts, and also it counts as transformative if it's been, in my case, muted, cropped, and heavily filtered as well. But yeah, Formula One in general are one of the more stingy sports when it comes to losing their footage. But yeah, most other, there aren't many other F1 YouTubers that go to the effort of like paying for footage. I think it's mostly just done through fair use. Yeah. But I because I use so much stuff, I'm probably going to get in trouble in the future. It wouldn't surprise me. At which point, I don't know if I lose. This is one thing that concerns me with this kind of job, because I'm self-employed and this is my sole source of income is just from YouTube. If that goes down the toilet, my only backup is to then try and get everyone to move over to Patreon, because I think that's what's happened. Like Rocket Powered Mohawk, I'm guessing that his channel has been demonetized because he says a lot of stuff that, you know, is not for everyone. And again, he uses lots of race footage unapologetically, but he has a lot of people on his Patreon, so I think that's where he's making his money and that. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I never thought I'd have this job, and content creation is such a new thing, and 5 years in the future, you never know where this might be. I want to expand. I don't want to just be making videos in 5 years' time, or I want to be doing more stuff. I want to be doing more kind of field work. Like, I love what Matt Amies does when he goes to track days and he goes to museums and he gets to see these cars and meet teams and drivers. I would love to do that stuff. I would love to present TV documentaries about Formula One as well. Yeah, I would love that. But we'll see, I guess. Opinion on Rocket Powered Mohawk. I think he's funny. He's getting more and more unfiltered, I think, in what he says, and he's starting to talk about a lot of like political things and everything and like that, and it's like, you know, he can do what he likes. I mean, for me, I keep, obviously it's an F1 channel, and you know, I keep it on topic, and again, that's why on Twitter I don't talk about anything that isn't to do with Formula One on that page, and I don't talk about politics unless it's directly related to Formula One and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think he's funny, and he's tapped into a market, and he's gone fully on the like comedian line as well. He's not. It's the obviously it's getting less and less factual what he's saying, and he digs deep into conspiracy theories and that. But he's there to be a comedian, and he's very, very good at it. But yeah. Okay, I've done all the questions from the document, or I skipped a few because they were either impossible to answer or ones that were covered already. Yeah, I'll stay on till 6, and it's 5:53, so we'll be going for 3 hours at that point. Honestly, glad you don't. A lot of creators think that because we want to hear about their views on one subject, we want to hear about their political opinions as well. Yeah, I don't really. That's the thing. People come to me to talk about Formula One, and I don't particularly when it comes to politics, especially. I don't want to alienate people by if I have opinions they don't agree with or anything else like that. It's just I'm not going to do that. I mean, there are sometimes I have considered starting a second channel where I would do the same style of videos but covering things to do with like non F1. So not politics, but I would cover things about engineering. So I'd cover aviation history or maritime or there's a small market, but I've been a lifelong fan of the TV show Robot Wars, which was a British game show where people built robots that fought each other in an arena. I mean, most people probably know what it is, especially if you're British, you will. And there are Robot Wars YouTubers, but it's a very, very small market, much smaller than Formula One. So I probably wouldn't. And again, I would have the problems of using a lot of BBC footage from the TV show if that's going to get me in trouble with copyright. But yeah, Robot Wars is one of my favorite shows. That's another thing I have like an encyclopedic knowledge of. But obviously, and I've made a couple of Robot Wars jokes in a couple of videos. But yeah, yeah, there are subjects like astronomy, and there are loads of different things where I have lots of interest in, and I've covered in lots of detail. And sometimes it gets a bit overwhelming because F1 is on my mind constantly because I'm working pretty much around the clock. I don't take many. I don't often have days where I'm not doing something, either script writing or doing some research or whatever. Hi Peter. I saw the 200. Yeah, no, it's 20k, not 200. I wish. My target for the end of this year was to get to 50. I think that's unlikely. I was hoping it would grow a bit faster than it has, but yeah. I think 30k is realistic because I'm getting about 1,000 subscribers a month at the moment. But we'll see if I can. Yeah, there are some channels like Rocket Powered Mohawks. He's been making videos about as long as I have, and he's got 10 times the followers because his stuff just goes viral, and all of that as well. Thank you for your hard work on the videos, mate, and for taking time to answer your questions. You're welcome. Yeah. It's gone quite fast. I've been going for nearly 3 hours. Normally, I'd have a really, really sore throat, and I normally have that after recording a script, especially if it's a long script. I get a really, really sore throat. And actually, you can hear this. The second iceberg video, I recorded that in an afternoon. It took about 5 or 6 hours to record the audio, and then it took a whole day of cutting it down and editing it, which is by far my least favorite part of content creation. And you can hear my voice getting kind of croakier as it goes on. If you compare the first tier with the final tier, you'll definitely hear the difference. Robot Wars or BattleBots? Yeah, I haven't watched much of BattleBots because again that's an American show. There was that Chinese version of Robot Wars that was a couple of years ago. I watched that for a bit, but no, I never really watched BattleBots. Robot Wars was always my jam. I was very disappointed when they brought it back, and then they got rid of it again after only 3 seasons. But yeah. Hi Peter, congrats on the 20k. What is your favourite underdog victory in F1? Maldonado 2012. Mine is Checo Sakir 2020. Great driving, great show. I've never given up. Yeah, that was a good. I mean, as well as the fact that things fell into place for him, he did drive exceptionally well. He came from last to first. I mean, we've seen nearly last. I mean, but nobody has started last and finished first. People have been last at one point and won because that's what Button did Canada 2011. I think John Watson won a race from 20th one year. So did Rubens Barrichello. His first win was from like 19th or 20th. Vettel came in Germany 2019. Vettel came so close to winning from last place. Like people don't talk about that drive nearly enough. Vettel Germany 2019. Because he started last, and he was the only driver in the entire race that never spun or went off track. And he finishes 5 seconds behind Max in second. And it was his like home race as well, because he won at the Nürburgring, but he never won at Hockenheim, which was just down the road from Heppenheim, his hometown. Barrichello, yeah, Hockenheim 2000, yeah, that was the one. It was his inaugural victory. Favorite underdog? Everyone loves the Maldonado one. I was thinking, should I just do a biography video on Maldonado? Because I originally didn't bother because Josh Revel did his, and obviously Josh has got his own style, and he does the, WTF happened to insert driver here. But then he's done the rain car decay, and so have I done the rain. I mean, maybe I should do one on Maldonado, and I can just remind myself and everybody of how many penalties he got in his, like, almost every weekend. It was something. Like, I went through, because for the next video, I was going through the 2012 results, and every single race, it's a grid penalty for blocking a driver or for crashing into someone the previous race or something like that. So yeah, maybe I should just do that and remind everyone of how, particularly 2015 was an especially decrepit year for him. What other sports are you into? I covered this a little bit earlier. I don't really follow any other sports properly. A little bit. I like the World Cup and the Euros in football. I watch Wimbledon when it's on. I love the Olympics, but Formula One is the only, and the other motor like IndyCar, F2, F3, Formula E. Those are the only sports I follow seriously. I'm not much of an athlete. I was at school. I was terrible at football. I was good at track and field. I was a good swimmer. I could run long distance quite well. And I was all right at hockey, but I was really, really bad at football and rugby and tennis and that. And yeah. But yeah. If only go-karting was a sport you could do at school. Not that I was any good at that when I did that either. Yeah, F1 needs a Maldonado Grosjean S driver on the current grid, even if it's just for the spectacle. They do, because Taki Inoue said this a couple of weeks ago on Twitter, that we need a comedy driver, and he's right. This is the thing, they are too... It's easy to rag on De Vries and even Logan Sargent. He's getting a lot of flack. I think give him time. The driving standards have improved dramatically in the past 10 years alone. These days, like, as well as the cars never breaking down, the drivers hardly ever make mistakes. We don't often get collisions. Like, 10 years ago, you could always rely on one of the Toro Rosso drivers to break their front wing off on the first lap of a race and then have to pit and weave their way through. And like Kazuki Nakajima, every other race he was rear-ending someone. But now, and drivers, they hardly ever crash out on their own. I mean, the closest we got to that was George Canada. Like, he can still carry on. Like, I feel like it's been, unless it happened like 3 races ago and I've forgotten, I feel like it's been forever since a car has, to quote rocket-powered Mohawk, fucked it into the wall just out of nowhere on their own. What De Vries did with Magnussen in Canada, yeah, no, there's been worse. I don't think he was trying to barge them off, but just the brakes locked and it's difficult. Once you're alongside them, it's difficult to get around. If we could have Mazepin that isn't so much of a spoiled brat, but I mean, Nikita Mazepin, I have some sympathy in the fact that people were just out for blood after everything that happened in the winter. And you could see that affected him because he was being scrutinised so much for what happened off track, which he should have been. But then also his on track, it was obviously affecting his on track performances, and he was just well below standards. Haas probably felt very embarrassed as well because they knew nobody wanted him in that seat, and he was costing them a lot of money. He just wasn't driving up to standard. They knew he was just there for his money, and it's like, what are they getting in return for this? Yeah. Although having said that, he did do 2 absolutely brilliant passes on Mick at Silverstone and Interlagos, but those are the only highlights from his time, basically. We need a villain. It's a damn shame F1 has never had one in 70 years. It depends what you consider a villain, because some people see Prost as a villain, some people see Schumacher as a villain, or Max. Just whoever they don't like, basically, is the villain. I get a sort of heel, but then we're leaning into WWE. I mean, if that counts as a sport, I used to watch WWE really, really avidly about 15 years ago. I was watching a couple of videos last night, actually. Every so often I'll find some old classics. I used to love watching like Jeff Hardy and stuff. That's not really a sport in the same sense, because it's not, like, people say it's fake, but it's not fake. It's just choreographed. So they're not actually throwing punches like boxing, but the body slams and most of the moves are real, and the bumps, as they're called, that's real. So it does hurt like hell, but it's all planned in advance. That's obviously, and so the winner is known. Um, if we're leaning into WWE, see the Miami Driver intros. Yeah, that was cringe. We don't need that. We don't need any more of that. We don't need the sport becoming more American. Sorry to any Americans, but yeah, we don't need it turning into WWE in that way. But yeah, it's a lot like, I can see the concerns of race control that, like WWE, they're thinking if we go for the entertainment side, then we just need to start rigging races to try and manufacture making it interesting. And that's why, yeah, with WWE, the matches are always going to be good because they've scripted it and they've said, okay, we need this to happen and that, rather, because if you just leave them to it, you need a lot of well, the thing is, they don't just hurting themselves, because you need some of the moves are so high risk and complex. You need a lot of cooperation between the two of them to do it in a way that doesn't hurt them. PK has always had the reputation of being a villain. Even in his F1 days, the guy tried to burn Senna in the media and then made jokes about his death. Yeah, okay, so yeah, PK. He's one of the ones I have a huge amount of respect of him as a driver, because he's got 3 championships and 60 podiums or 23 wins, like really bloody good. And again, he came from the 80s, and it's just such a cool era for F1. I'm really getting fond of drivers from the drivers that race in the 1980s in particular, because it was a kind of era of rock stars for F1. And he's someone who, like, I think he has a lot to say, to reminisce on in terms of what other drivers were like. And obviously, I'll always take the opinions of drivers of his caliber on board in terms of talking about the current racing and what it was like back then and their views on other drivers, because they know what they're talking about. But yeah, he was just needlessly hostile to everyone and to Senna and that. And you can see why he's not so popular in Brazil because of that. And a lot of people can see, like, maybe they feel, I don't know if this is a bit touchy, aggrieved that Senna lost his life, but that Senna is the one that everybody loved and was and that. I'm not saying that PK should have lost his life, but you know what I mean. If you see Senna as like the good guy or whatever. I find Riccardo Patrese seriously underrated. His longevity was amazing. Yeah, it was. The more I read about him, the more I'm impressed. Some people didn't like me ranking him, I think 14th or 13th on the 90s list, but that was counting just the 90s when he was at Williams and then Benetton. But yeah, in the 80s, he had a car that broke down all the time, so his results on paper don't look brilliant because the car was never working. But yeah, insane longevity. He was there from 1977 until 1993. That is a huge, in terms of how much the car's changed. That's before ground effect, and then right up until active suspension. Like that is an enormous period, because if you think 16 years ago from now, well, that's Hamilton 2007. Like, it's not, the cars haven't changed quite so dramatically, I don't think. It's not, but also because there are fewer races per year, it means fewer race starts. If Mario, the corkscrew, sorry. Oh, Laguna Seca. Yeah, go. This is going back way because I said race at Bathurst. Let's race F1 at Laguna Seca. I want to see how that goes. I mean, yeah, they good luck getting a good like ride height and camber angles to get through the corkscrew. But yeah, it's actually quite a small circuit is the thing. But it was, yeah, that'd be fun. Just try it. Like, Andretti drove a McLaren there. Pato O'Ward's been driving Mika Häkkinen's McLarens there. What was I talking about before that? Patrese. Yeah, he was good. Yeah, Patrese. Video editing software, Wondershare Filmora. I'm losing my track. I forgot I can't remember what I was talking about before Patrese now. But PK, wasn't it? I think, yeah. But yeah, he obviously just says a lot of things that he's just needlessly harsh and rude, I think, PK, and he's just done a very good job of alienating himself, which is a shame. I've said this on Twitter, my favourite F1 related image is the picture of all the champions at Bahrain in 2010. the only living ones that were missing from that were PK and Raikkonen. They probably have legitimate reasons for being there. My assumption was that Raikkonen didn't show up because he couldn't be bothered, because by that point he'd just left F1 for the first time, and PK, maybe he just thought, well, if I go there, I'm just going to get in arguments with other drivers if there are any he doesn't get on with from his era. I don't know. It's a shame that those two were missing, because otherwise it was such a nice image, so much talent in one photo. And that's when Surtees and Andretti, not Andretti, Jack Brabham was still alive, and that as well. That needs to be. I wish they would do that every 10 years. If they, I mean, okay, pretend the virus never happened, but they should have done that again in 2020. Get all the living champions back. Yeah, Wondershare. Yeah, Wondershare Filmora. Yeah. I'm trying to get into making videos. You couldn't tell. Yeah, so Wondershare Filmora, you do have to pay a subscription, an annual subscription up from, I think it's about £50 a year to not to get rid of the watermark that's on the videos, but otherwise it does everything you need it to do. Like, there's still loads of stuff I'm learning how to use on it, basically. And yeah, if you're trying to make videos, yeah, with the copyright stuff, just go easy when it comes to using like footage that isn't yours. Just use it in small bits, and when you upload a video, YouTube does an automatic copyright check, and it will tell you if they found anything. 90% of the time it doesn't find anything, and usually it won't after it's been uploaded. But yeah, those are a couple of tips for anyone who wants to start content creation, because yeah, I'm still new to it. I mean, my videos, I like the way they look, but I still think I could make them a bit more flashy and add in more stuff, but that just takes ages, and they take long enough to make as it is. And but before doing this, I had no skills in content creation at all, because I was just trained as a musician. How dramatic would the 1993 season have been if Prost and Mansell were at Williams competing against Senna and McLaren? Well, they were teammates before. They didn't really, obviously, they didn't seem to get on too well. I mean, Mansell wasn't a big fan of being his teammate. Well, the thing is, I don't think Senna provided relatively little competition in '93 because the Williams car was just so good. Although, having said that, Prost himself did not actually like it. He said it was difficult to control because maybe he just wasn't so well adjusted to active suspension, but because the settings could change a lot and it was a bit touchy over bumps and stuff. Yeah. I think Prost would still win the title, maybe, but Senna wouldn't have been a contender still. It just, yeah, I think. I keep making the camera shake. I'm shaking my leg onto the desk, and it's making my lap. I'm noticing it in the reflection. It's making my thing. It's been doing that the whole stream. Right. Okay. Well, I've been going for 3 hours, so I think I'm going to call it a day, because it's 6 o'clock here now. So yeah, I got through a lot of questions. Thank you for submitting a lot. It's good to chat every once in a while. Yeah, the next video will hopefully, well, it should be out this week. I haven't actually recorded the script for it yet, or actually written most of it, but well, it should be, because there's a race next weekend, so I need to get it out before that, because otherwise that delays it by like 3 days. But yeah, so yeah, thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you all around.